Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida.
Old World, Florida. Dude, I'm telling you, dude. Dr. Narco Longo came on and dropped the hammer of the god.
America's mother, daughter of Atlantis. God sent the Weatherland, the devil sent the Spanish. Florida is Eden, the fountain of youth, Kali is deception. So Florida is the truth.
Welcome to Florida, baby.
Dr. Narco Longo.
Florida, it is everything. There's too much truth bombs being dropped. I can't digest it all.
Old World, Florida.
Come on, guys.
Please welcome Dr. Narco Longo.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. It's June 16th. I'm coming to you live from the Dancing Elephant Bookstore, Florida's #1 book and crystal store. And we're continuing our Monday night music conspiracy series, breaking down popular bands that either are from Florida or have a lot to do with Florida. Not always. We'll see where it goes. But this is a big Florida band. And maybe not a Florida band, but specifically the lead singer, who, in all honesty, as soon as he was gone, the band just kind of, he largely was the band. I'm a big Ray Manzarek guy. He was the other half of the band, you could say. But Jim Morrison was the heart and the soul, the voice of this band. And Jim Morrison was born in Florida. So not only that, he had his eventual kind of downfall in Florida. And his father, who was a very well-connected guy in the Navy, right? He was an admiral, rear admiral, involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. He spent a lot of time in Florida too, growing up before Jim was born. So, whole bunch of Florida gopher holes connected to Jim Morrison, and some of them connect to people like Aleister Crowley, okay, who Jim Morrison was very influenced by. But that's kind of the gist of the show. We're also going to be talking about how he potentially faked his death. How so many people close to him kind of, say it without saying it, or kind of point to the truth indirectly, say a lot of suspicious things. And a lot of their stories kind of match up on this issue. But yeah, so that's kind of the overview. And of course, we've got Austin here, the son and Mensch. And
what's up, baby?
Seth.
What's happening, peoples?
We'll start with you, Austin. How much you like the Doors, and how much did you know before this, and what are you excited to talk about?
Oh my goodness. I heard little tales about the Doors growing up. Like, who are these guys? I never really got into them until about high school. And you, Doctor, actually were already into them. You were really into the Doors in high school, if I'm not mistaken. And we started getting into the psychedelics and whatnot, and that shit was like hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of got me more into the Doors in high school. And Jim doing like the shamanic dancing and stuff while being just like blackout drunk. That boy was on another level. And yes, this will be a good one. Seth?
Yeah, Seth, you're up.
So, unlike the Beatles, where I actually really enjoyed their music and came up listening to them and can play a lot of their songs and knew a lot of their history, I never was attracted to the Doors. I don't know what it was. It just sounded like my dad's generation of music in a way, and I one listened to come on baby light my fire. I was just checked out.
Mhm.
Didn't like it, wasn't attracted to it. So I'm coming in here a little ignorant to the music, although I know their hits. What I do know about more is the Laurel Canyon scene, sort of the CIA involvement,
Yes, sir.
their connection to, well, I guess the name being connected to Aldous Huxley, The Doors of Perception. I can go deep down that rabbit hole. So yeah, well, I don't have a lot of the musical background here for the Doors. I checked out some tunes before this, and I'm looking at some lyrics, and I don't know how many rabbit holes there are in the lyrics, or how many clues, or how many gold nuggets there are. Maybe you guys can help us in the chat if you know any songs that give us nice clues. I can't really help in that department, but yeah, I'm here to talk about anything related to Huxley or his faking his own death. There's actually multiple theories, so we'll get into like the big one that most everybody knows about. Then there's a lesser known one that's gaining traction this year with a documentary that just got released, and also maybe Maharishi if that comes up, and definitely like the CIA involvement, Laurel Canyon. I definitely want to preface this by saying like I'm not an expert in this stuff, and you should probably follow up with Dave McGowan's work. He wrote what is it called? Weird Seasons Inside the Canyon, all about Lookout Mountain Labs, which is like that big film studio in Laurel Canyon where they probably filmed the moon landing. I can't say that for sure, but Lookout Mountain Labs, just to sort of set the scene here, one of the big in military intelligence buildings that was also a film studio. It was officially open from 1947 to 1969. 1947 was the first year that the CIA was founded. I guess it was the OSS and it became the CIA in 1947. And then by 69, that's when the moon landing allegedly happened. So interesting timeline. And we're kind of right in the middle of this. We're at the end of that, actually, in the 60s. Jim Morrison, allegedly died in 1971. And so, yeah, we'll talk about everything related to that, I guess. Happy to be here. Oh, and also, I also just want to say, I was pretty psyched last week when you told me that we had to postpone this episode because you were going to do a show with Santos Bonacci. So just want to say congrats on that. That was a legendary talk.
For real.
We all knew it was going to happen at some point, the Old World Florida Santos Bonacci crossover, and happy that it did. It was great, and happy that we can do this tonight.
For real. Yeah, it takes a lot to change up the doc's schedule, okay? And that we didn't do that lightly, okay? That was a Santos Bonacci. That was on Monday, right? We had to switch the show up, yeah. But it was an honor having Santos on. And yes, guys, we were sipping on that sweet aged champagne, come on. But hell yeah, guys. But thanks for that. Shout out, Seth.
Yeah.
Go check that out, people. Well, Seth, I guess the tables are turned on this one a little bit because I grew up loving the Doors. Loved the Doors from like 16 onward. Now, I will say one thing, okay? There was always something that was said by older people that I always heard. It was almost like a meme before memes. People would say, when you get older, the Doors aren't as good. And I'd say that's kind of true. Because when I was young, I'd say they were like, oh my God, Jim Morrison's going so deep on these lyrics. And you get older, you kind of realize, it's not that profound. But the guy only made it to 27. And for having no training, having no nothing, he, very impressive vocalist, I think. And I think, he sang with like a man's voice. That was kind of dying out in the 60s. You had a lot of these weaselly voiced psychedelic rock people and, you know, very nasally kind of.
All these British people coming in.
Yeah, Jim Morrison, I love his voice, man. He had a great, big, strong voice. People said he was trying to rip off Frank Sinatra. Well, the two of them are Sagittariuses. I'm a Sagittarius. I've got a soft spot for Jim. Jim talks about being a Sagittarius. He's got a couple different horse songs and travel songs. But my dad liked the Doors a little bit. And I'd say my brother and I liked the Doors more than him. When we got into the Doors, we liked them a lot. And like Austin says, when we started dropping acid in high school and stuff, you know, 17, 18, that was, I'll say this, the Doors piss on the Grateful Dead, okay? The Grateful Dead are nothing.
Oh, bro, I don't understand the whole Grateful
on
Dead
acid.
culture.
When you're on acid, the Doors, number one. I think that was the big appeal. That was the huge appeal to the Doors because they were on so much acid. I feel like the Doors got out of acid what it's supposed to give you, whereas the Beatles were just like, nah, this is just like psychological operations. Who knows? I love the Doors. I think Ray Manzarek is a genius. Ray Manzarek, the keyboardist for the Doors. There's not many people who can do what he did. He was a pioneer. Love Ray Manzarek. Big, tall guy, always sharply dressed. He'd play the melodies and the organ with his right hand and play the bass with his left hand on two separate keyboards. Kind of pioneered that. And there's no bassist in the Doors. So he's not just playing like a typical piano thing. He's playing the bass on one hand. Sounds like a bass guitar. And the organ on the other. Now that's kind of the motor behind the Doors. Like that's why the Doors sound so distinct. Then you add Jim Morrison. You know, I've got a soft spot for him too because he's Irish, Scottish. You know, that's good stuff right there. And
he's from Florida.
Yeah, and he's like a bard. He's a shaman. He's a poet.
Bard,
no one has ever combined poetry and music in a less cringe way. The Doors are the only people who actually pulled off poetry and music, rock and roll especially. But yeah,
Ray
I love
was
Jim
also
Morrison.
an intelligence agent. I don't know if you guys know that. He was
Ray?
like, yeah.
Well, Ray was in the military, yeah.
Well, so check this out. Before he met Jim at UCLA in film school, but before that, he attempted to enlist in the Army Signal Corps as a camera operator, but instead he was assigned to the highly selective Army Security Agency as a prospective intelligence analyst. So what that tells me is that they hired him and then they publicly said no thank you, right? And then they put him covertly into the 60s scene into
That's
a college.
exactly what I think happened, Seth.
Yeah. So I mean, just like what's the guy's name? The Vanderbilt.
Well, I can speak to this a little more.
Go for it.
There, you know, Ray's kind of an honest guy, and he talks about he has this entire spoken word album. It's called Spoken Word, but he's really just telling stories while he's improvising all the piano. He's like noodling on the keyboard and telling these stories. It's really, really nice. We're going to listen to one of those tracks. It's like a 13-minute long interview. Him talking about the death of Jim Morrison. Perhaps the most in-depth kind of tell-all there is, you know, from a close member.
And keep in mind that the record is called Myth and Reality, and it's full of one-eye symbolism on the cover.
Good point. Now, in that, he talks about, you know, the Doors meeting and ending, but he also talks about him being in a very, very long kind of membership or like contract with these record labels before the Doors were ever put together. So they're without a doubt, from the beginning, we know that Ray was trying to put bands together and had these record executives kind of backing him. Like, oh, that band didn't work. Well, let's try this one. That band didn't work. Let's try this one. And one of those was Rick and the Ravens, which was Ray and one or two of his brothers. And believe it or not, Jim Morrison, his first concert ever, Ray tells the story. Talk about duping people and acting. Jim Morrison's first concert, he played guitar with a guitar for Rick and the Ravens or one of their various groups. He wasn't even plugged in. They were paid to have 5 men on, they were paid to have 5 people on the stage. And Ray said, "Hey Jim, come join. Just stand up on stage." The guitar wasn't even plugged in. So, you know, take that how you will. But basically, Ray was not just, he didn't fall into a great band. You know, he was really trying hard to put a band together. And they were going from different style to different style. That's another thing. You know, Ray wasn't just pushing this one style, trying to find the people that fit. Ray was kind of jumping from style to style, you know, doing like old blues and rock and jazz and all this stuff. Then boom, out of nowhere, this psychedelic explosion happens. But I really think we should start out with the birth of Jim Morrison. Then we can kind of get into Ray and how he was in the military, right? And Ray was a little bit older, just a tad bit older, I believe.
Yep. Even the guitar player Robbie had military connections with his father, who worked at the Rand Corporation. Not only worked at the Rand Corporation, but was apparently pretty high up at Rand, which is like a military intelligence, research and development.
Wow.
Yeah. And Wikipedia just says that his dad was an engineer. So I'll take that for what it is.
Also, his dad was almost like their manager early on. He was helping them pay for studio time. They were often playing at Krieger's house. And Krieger was the richest of all of them. They all say that, you know, Krieger lived in a really, really nice neighborhood. But, okay. So Jim Morrison, people, let's get a look at him. Get a look at the guy. Jim Morrison's the singer of The Doors.
And whoever keeps commenting that Jim is the same agent that plays Rush Limbaugh, we're going to get to that. You see me comment like 5 times. Like, we know. We're going to get there.
Chill, bro.
Yeah, chill.
Are you incontinent, dude?
Yeah. Are you Rush Limbaugh, dog?
Keep it in, bro. Oh, yeah. We got a nice tip from my brother here. Show the mugshot in the store we have. Yep, I will. I'll pull it out.
Chungus, Pookie.
Hell yeah. So, whoops. Jim Morrison. James Douglas Morrison was an American singer, songwriter, and poet who was the lead vocalist and primary lyricist of the rock band The Doors. Due to his charismatic persona, poetic lyrics, distinctive voice, and unpredictable performances, along with the dramatic circumstances, I'd say mysterious circumstances too, surrounding his life and early death, Morrison is regarded by critics and fans as one of the most influential frontmen in rock history. Since his death, his fame has endured as one of popular culture's top rebellious and oft-displayed icons, representing the generation gap in youth counterculture. Yeah. Together with keyboardist Ray Manzarek, Morrison founded The Doors in 1965 in Venice, California. The group spent 2 years in obscurity until shooting to prominence with its #1 hit single in the United States, Light My Fire, which was taken from the band's self-titled debut album. Total of 6 albums, all of which sold well. frequently gave spoken word poetry passages while the band was playing live. Manzarek said Morrison embodied hippie counterculture, rebellion. And then, it gets into his alcohol dependency. He was an alcoholic. I don't think that was fake. And then Morrison died unexpectedly in a Paris apartment at the age of 27, amid several conflicting witness reports. Since no autopsy was performed, the cause of Morrison's death remains disputed. Although the Doors recorded 2 more albums after Morrison died, his death greatly affected the band's fortunes, and they split up 2 years later. And inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993. So if you didn't know the Doors, if you've been living under a rock, that's Jim Morrison, lead singer of the Doors. And he was born in Florida. So early life here. Morrison was born on December 8th, 1943, in Melbourne, Florida, to Clara, Virginia, and Lieutenant George Stephen Morrison, later a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. His ancestors were Irish, Scottish, and English. In August 1964, Admiral Morrison was commanding U.S. naval forces during the Gulf of Tonkin incident. The following year, in 1965, the incident was a leading pretext used to justify U.S. engagement in the Vietnam War. Morrison had a younger sister, Anne Robin, who was born in Albuquerque, and a younger brother, Andrew, who was born in Los Altos, California. And we'll stop there before getting to more of the Jim Morrison lore.
And can I mention something about his dad too?
Go for it.
Like that pretext to not only invade Vietnam, but like ramp up the amount of troops by about 10 times is, I don't want to understate that. Just to say he was involved in Gulf of Tonkin or was in charge during that is still a bit of an understatement because that was the event that justified sending from 20,000 troops, U.S. troops, to 200,000 the next year. And in a total, 2.7 million American soldiers fought in Vietnam. It was one of the bloodiest wars of all time. You know what I mean? And we still have people around today who are part of it. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. And also, interestingly, I don't know if this is jumping too far ahead, but the day that they decommissioned that boat, that ship, was the same day that Jim died. And so that's an interesting connection too. And that was in 1971. But the Gulf of Tonkin, I mean, that was a huge pretext to just go crazy on Vietnam. And I mean, we're seeing a war happen right now. War's always happening. It always kind of doesn't sit right with me, obviously. I don't really know what I'm trying to say about this, but this is what Jim's dad was working for.
This had great implications, devastating implications. This seemingly small engagement had avalanched down into a full-fledged war that we didn't have to get involved in. And this is, some would consider this a false flag, or kind of more of like a teasing, or like a taunting, something like that. But you could kind of group it in the same class as the Zimmerman note, right? The sinking of the Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, right? These are triggering events that were really turned into propaganda, weaponized, got people thinking emotionally instead of, reacting emotionally instead of thinking logically. Mm-hmm. And so the Gulf of Tonkin is Vietnam's Pearl Harbor. This is what got us into the war, really solidified us, in the war. So what Seth's saying is right. And to think that Jim Morrison's dad was arguably the person in charge on this day, that's certainly one of the people in charge. He was in the chain of command, they say, in the chain of command. on that day in that location. To think he's over there leading the war effort, kind of at the front of the war effort. And then his son is over in California, indirectly leading the anti-war effort, or, kickstarting the anti-war movement. That's kind of what you would call controlling both sides of the movement. There's a better way to articulate that, but
no, that's great, and you put into words what I was trying to say as well. And the whole Laurel Canyon scene in the 60s and 70s was basically being used to quell anti-war movements and also just infiltrate it with spies. So the Doors were part of a bigger scene there. All these clubs started popping up in Laurel Canyon, which is sort of this far off, like quiet little area outside of Hollywood, Los Angeles, that all of a sudden, right when these bands started coming out, the Byrds and the Doors and all this stuff, the clubs started popping up too. So they were funded with intelligence money as well. And definitely served to sort of like prop up and manipulate that scene, and also just implant spies everywhere.
Yeah, and we'll kind of go chronologically. We'll get back to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which happened in 1964. But I want to talk about Jim Morrison being born in Florida, because there's different references in his lyrics that usually go unnoticed, that actually trace some of his early memories in Florida. For example, King's Highway, the King's Road, King's Highway. That's a road in Florida that he grew up near.
And that's a lyric in The End.
Yep. Crawling king snake. Now, there's king snakes all over the United States. But Florida is known for having its own king snake. And Jim didn't just grow up in Florida, or he wasn't just born in Florida. He grew up in Florida. He was part of a military family, so they moved around a lot, right? They went up to the Northeast. They lived in Albuquerque for a little bit. But Jim's grandparents lived in Clearwater. Dun, dun, dun. Clearwater. Clearwater is the Scientology town. That's Scientology headquarters, is Clearwater. Now, is that a random association? No. Because Jim's parents lived on the East Coast. And by the time it was, Jim was college aged, he went to FSU. He actually went to a junior college in St. Petersburg, and he lived at his grandparents in Clearwater. But his family moved back to the East Coast of Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And like I said, his dad largely grew up in Florida too. Moved around a lot in Florida. But let's watch this. This is from Camera Sober. This is an old video of Jim Morrison's birthplace and then his first home, so you guys can get an idea. Melbourne's on the East Coast, Central Florida. And this is the hospital, I guess, or the place of birth. Kind of run down now. This is his house for a first home. Run down. It looks a little bit nicer in some other videos. But yeah, that's where he grew up early on. And then there's actually a video of him in FSU. So when he's like 18 or so. Here, just chat for a sec. I'm going to pull up this other video.
Cool. Apparently the chat's telling us Melbourne's got the best breaks for surfing. And that
God,
Jim also, he moved around a lot during his childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently went to high school in Virginia. Someone's saying that the Route 1 in Virginia near the Pentagon is King's Highway. So, he definitely did go to high school there. Maybe let's not jump ahead too far. But there are some interesting lyrics in the end. I always thought like lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, all the children are insane.
That's New Smyrna Beach, the King's Highway that was built for the Menorcans, the Greeks, the Romans, the Italian servants that were brought over in the 1700s.
Whoa.
Under their Scottish overlords. One of the earliest European colonies in Florida, the biggest European colony in American history. The largest mass movement of Europeans to America was in New Smyrna, Florida, not far from Melbourne. And King's Highway was constructed for that mass migration, for the new influx of British and Mediterranean people. That's the King's Highway. Sorry, Virginians, fucking losers. Not a chance. It's
maybe that was just slang they had for that up there, but it has no match against the Florida King's Highway.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it stood out to him that there was one in both places. I don't think the one in Florida goes up that high. But here's a picture of Jim Morrison at his grandparents' house when he was like a teenager, looking a little burly. He lived there while going to St. Pete Junior College. Yeah.
Looks happy as hell.
Yeah.
What happened to him?
This lady's all.
She's smelling his essence.
For real. She's about that life.
And the guy's with is jacked, dude. He's like old world jacked.
So that's him. That's a picture of him at his grandparents' house. So he had, his family on one side, or his parents on one coast, his grandparents on the other coast. And what's interesting, let's just go look at, since we're on the topic of Clearwater, if you want to talk about naval programming and naval brainwashing, Jim's dad was in the Navy. He's got many songs about sailing and being in the Navy. And he was kind of familiar with sailing culture a little bit. And being a Sagittarius, right? Horse Latitudes, that's a Doors song. That's referring to Florida. The Horse Latitudes was a big age of discovery thing. But whatever. So Clearwater, Florida is Scientology headquarters. Clearwater is a city on the county seat of Pinellas County, Florida. Bruh. America. Gulf of America, Wikipedia. Come on. And to the southeast lies Tampa Bay. All right. The Church of Scientology owns the majority of property in the Clearwater downtown core district. So, yeah. Originally the home of the Tocobaga people, Tocanabagio. They were smoking it down. Place of the gourds. Let's get to the Scientology. Scientology moved in 1976. They were headquartered in Clearwater. Okay.
L. Ron Hubbard was a Pisces.
A lot of religious leaders are. Come on. Get to the Scientology. The Church of Scientology's spiritual headquarters are located in downtown Clearwater. The church refers to Clearwater as its flag land base. The Church of Scientology owns several historical landmark buildings, including the Fort Harrison Hotel. As of 2019, Scientology had purchased so much property in downtown Clearwater that it had owned most of the commercial buildings in the downtown core, many of which remained vacant. According to an investigation by the Tampa Bay Times, the Church of Scientology, its members and companies they control, now own 185 properties that cover 101 acres in the center of downtown. Half the properties were bought since January 2017. 73% of the property is now tax exempt for religious reasons, and et cetera, et cetera. You guys get it. So they're big in Clearwater. And in fact, in Scientology, the equivalent of becoming enlightened in Scientology is called going clear. Going clear. So Clearwater, going clear. You can see the connection there. And hopefully we've got a documentary in the works. Just got to line up the timing with one of he's the vice mayor of Clearwater. He was an anti-Scientology, like whistleblower type guy. And we've got a documentary in the works with him. Vice mayor of Scientology. Sorry, Clearwater. But interesting that that's where his grandparents lived. And Scientology is largely like a naval thing. The Sea Org, they refer to so much, they use so much like maritime terminology in their religion. And L. Ron Hubbard was infatuated with sailing. He always dressed like an admiral, right? He always had like a sailor's hat on, and he spent a large portion of the end of his life sailing the world, right? Just living on a yacht. Scientology has its own fleet to this day. That's like, sometimes they have more of a presence on the ocean than they do on the land. They have this big fleet that goes around the world. It's pretty crazy. So they're all obsessed with the Navy. And Jim Morrison also. He didn't love the Navy, but he was forced. He grew up in a Navy family. Now, what else? Is that it? They just like boats and shit? No. L. Ron Hubbard was indirectly influenced by Aleister Crowley. Jim Morrison loved Aleister Crowley. Jim Morrison talked about liking Aleister Crowley and even put a bust of Aleister Crowley in one of their album covers. And so yeah, L. Ron Hubbard never met Aleister Crowley. It was through Jack Parsons. Aleister Crowley, I think, had only met Jack Parsons once. I could be wrong on that. But was corresponding with him through letters. Jack Parsons met L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, they did that Babylon working ritual in the desert together.
Yep. So Jack Parsons was like a devotee of Aleister Crowley. And Crowley wanted to use him to do some stuff and thought he would have been, a productive guy to do some work with. We'll just call it that. And then he was a rocket engineer. Okay. That's what the kids are calling it nowadays.
Look at how autistic he looks.
He looks like the singer from Faith No More.
Looks like an autist.
Oh, Mike Patton.
That's Mike
High
Patton.
functioning.
It's Mike Parsons right there. So Jack Parsons is the link between Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard never met Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley actually denounced L. Ron Hubbard. Just off of what he heard, right? Never met the guy. So people really, really like to say that there's this big link between L. Ron Hubbard, Aleister Crowley. There is a link, but not a direct. They never met each other. It was through Jack Parsons. So Jack Whiteside Parsons was an American rocket engineer, chemist, and Thelemite occultist. Parsons was one of the principal founders of both the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and Aerojet. He invented the first rocket engine to use a castable composite rocket propellant and pioneered the advancement of both liquid fuel and solid fuel rockets. These are all gay sex terms, by the way, guys. Okay, these are all fake inventions, fake patents. Okay.
Yeah, it's just this tale of being initiated via butthole to the OTO.
Yep.
My rocket is taking off, guys.
For real. We're gonna call him Mike Patent from now on. Okay. Parsons was raised in Pasadena, California. He began amateur rocket experiments with school friend Edward Foreman. Went to Stanford. Hardship during the Great Depression. Blah, 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 blah. In 1939, Parsons converted to Thelema, a religious movement founded by English occultist Aleister Crowley. Parsons and his first wife, Helen Northrup, joined Crowley's Ordo Templi Orientis, or the OTO. He became the California OTO branch leader in 1942. Historians of Western esotericism cite him as a prominent figure in propagating Thelema in North America. Parsons was dismissed from JPL and Aerojet in 1944 due to his involvement with the OTO and his hazardous laboratory practices. They said you can't keep banging guys in here, Jack. Come on. Come on, buddy. In 1945, he and Helen divorced. In 1946, he married Marjorie Cameron. Shortly after, L. Ron Hubbard defrauded Parsons of his life savings. Parsons worked as an explosives expert during the 1940s, but his career in rocketry ended due to accusations of espionage and the increasing trend of McCarthyism. Jack Parsons died at the age of 37 in a home laboratory explosion. 1952. His death was officially ruled an accident, but many of his associates suspected suicide or murder. Although publicly unknown during his lifetime, Parsons is now recognized for his innovations in rocket engineering, advocacy of space exploration, and human spaceflight, and as an important figure in the history of the U.S. space program. He has been the subject of several biographies and fictionalized portrayals. Okay.
And also, NASA sort of acquired JPL, and it's still in operation today. So that should tell you something about the longevity of his work, even though he got booted, in the 40s or whatever. Yeah, JPL is still in operation today, 70, years later plus.
In January 1939, John and Frances Baxter, a brother and sister who had befriended Jack and Helen Parsons, took Jack to the Church of Thelema on Winona Boulevard, Hollywood, where he witnessed the performance of the Gnostic Mass. A performance ritual / created by Aleister Crowley. Celebrants of the church had included Hollywood actor John Carradine and gay rights activist Harry Hay. My God.
Any relation to David Carradine from fucking Kill Bill, dude? He looks like him.
Oh, he does look like him. What the hell? It's gotta be.
Let's look down the family.
Yes.
Children.
Yep.
Ooh, look at that. And I also heard David Carradine is in the OT, is like a cult member before he also died in the lab explosion, if you know what I'm saying. And he was beaten off. Yeah. But that's
David
crazy.
Carradine. Okay, well, back to the Jack Parsons. He got into the Aleister Crowley stuff, and then he helped expand it. And then he met L. Ron Hubbard. And he's not the only guy involved with like jet propulsion and the space program to be obsessed with Aleister Crowley and the Thelema and all that ceremonial magic. But okay, L. Ron Hubbard. Where's L. Ron?
Where's L. Ron?
I just searched L. Ron spelled out like
Like ELRON.
yeah. Okay. Just gotta search.
Yeah, wasn't he in the Navy, L. Ron Hubbard? Did you say that already?
Now disassociated from JPL and Aerojet, Parsons and Foreman founded the Ad Astra Engineering Company, under which Parsons founded the chemical manufacturing Vulcan Powder Company. Also, Ad Astra AA, that's another Aleister Crowley reference. Ad Astra was subject to an FBI investigation under suspicion of espionage when security agents from the Manhattan Project discovered that Parsons and Foreman had procured a chemical used in top secret project for a material known as only as X metal, but they were later acquitted of any wrongdoing. Blah 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 blah.
This is literally X-Men, dude. They're messing with all these crazy chemicals. Like, can you imagine what's going on?
The Manhattan Project. Yeah.
Vulcan Powder Company. How like occult and satanic does that shit sound?
It's not uncommon for the companies who do industrial work with planes and trains and spaceships and stuff to then start smaller, subsidiary chemical companies. We saw the same thing happen with the Rockefellers. They had their oil and steel monopolies, and then they bought up all these chemical companies so that they could use the byproducts of the oil and steel and turn them into drugs and basically monopolize that whole industry as well.
And Jack Parsons, this is how he met L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer and U.S. Navy officer. So I forgot. He was a U.S. Navy officer. That slipped my mind.
That's why they're all like ordered in seaman formation.
Yep. Seaman, poop deck, all that shit.
Magic
Also,
Man in the
this
chat
is-
said Willy Wonka alchemy real quick, and that's for sure Willy Wonka alchemy. That's exactly what Parsons was doing.
Yeah. And the whole Navy being gay thing, this fits right into that. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Science fiction writer and U.S. Navy officer L. Ron Hubbard soon moved into the parsonage. He and Parsons became close friends. Parsons wrote to Crowley that although Hubbard had no formal training in magic, he has an extraordinary amount of experience and understanding in the field. From some of his experiences, I deduce he is in direct touch with some higher intelligence, possibly his guardian angel. He is the most thelemic person I've ever met, and is complete accord with our own principles. Parsons and Sarah were in an open relationship, encouraged by OTO's polyamorous sexual ethics, and she became enamored with Hubbard. Parsons, despite attempting to repress his passions, became intensely jealous. Motivated to find a new partner through occult means, Parsons began to devote his energies to conducting black magic, causing concern among fellow OTO members who believed that he was invoking troublesome spirits into the parsonage. Jane Wolfe wrote to Crowley that, quote, "Our own Jack is enamored with witchcraft. The Homefort, I don't know what that is. Houndford, voodoo. From the start, he always wanted to evoke something, no matter what. I am inclined to think as long as he got a result. He told the residents that he was imbuing statues in the house with a magical energy in order to sell them to fellow occultists." Okay, so blah, 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 all this stuff gets out of control. In 1945, Parsons began a series of rituals based on Enochian magic, during which he masturbated onto magical tablets, accompanied by Sergei Prokofiev's second violin concerto. describing this magical operation as the Babylon working. Guys, this is all ceremonial magic is, by the way, when you get down to it.
Icky cookie.
Yeah. He hoped to bring about the incarnation of the Lemite goddess Babylon onto Earth. He allowed Hubbard to take part as his scribe, believing that he was particularly sensitive to detecting magical phenomena, as described by Richard Metzger. Parsons jerked off in the name of spiritual advancement, while Hubbard scanned the astral plane for signs and visions.
Anytime anyone mentions rocketry and rocket science, this is what I immediately think of, is the black magic, what they're trying to evoke with it.
Beat off rituals. He's like, this is one small shoot for man, one large shoot for mankind.
Yeah, the whole moon landing stuff is they're trying to penetrate the goddess, the moon goddess. It's all this goddess symbolism.
Trying to R-word the mother goddess, the universal mother archetype, getting R-worded by a giant rocket. All right, guys, there's so much Parsons stuff that we can't get into, but this we got to keep it on the doors. But
we're steering.
What ties all this together? Jack Parsons is the connection between L. Ron and Aleister Crowley. Did you know that Aleister Crowley had family in Titusville, Florida? That he came and visited at least once?
I didn't.
Let's go take a little map here. Take a look at the map.
Yes, I'm taking a holiday in Titusville. This is my family.
Alistair gets there. He's like, I thought we were heading for Tittiesville, not Titusville. Got duped. But all right, guys, this is Titusville, right there, where Aleister Crowley's family lived, and he visited at least once and stayed there. And then, pretty much the next major town down is Melbourne. And where do all the rockets take off? Right here. Cape Canaveral, Merritt Island.
Space Coast.
Guys, yeah, this is the Space Coast. This is the trifecta right there.
Oh my goodness.
You've got Aleister Crowley's old family home. You've got Jim Morrison, the birthplace of Jim Morrison. And then you've got where the rockets launch, where the first rockets launched. The Apollo moon landings, so-called moon landings. All in the same spot. You're talking about a 20-minute drive. 20-minute drive, if not less. From one to the next to the other. Maybe a little more. It's out there on its own. And this is a lot of this is very locked down. You can't go all over a lot of these places. But this is why we're talking about this. Aleister Crowley came here, and this is one of the few places in America that he spent time, multiple nights in a row with his family. How wholesome of him, right? And Jim Morrison was born not too far away.
This goes into your ancient Greek stuff too, because Titus is a Greek name. In the Bible, Titus was a Greek priest that Paul wrote to.
Yes.
And you've shown in your work that there's a lot to do with ancient Greek history in Florida more than meets the eye.
Yeah, and I think Titus is Yes, okay, so Titus was left in charge of ending the Jewish rebellion in the year 70 AD.
Whoa.
He besieged and captured Jerusalem and destroyed the city and the Second Temple. For this achievement, Titus was awarded a triumph. The Arch of Titus commemorates his victory and still stands today. So Titus is the Roman leader, emperor, the Roman emperor who destroyed the Second Temple, thereby fulfilling the prophecy that Jesus laid out, saying, it's all over now. The system's going to come crashing down. That's the destruction of the Second Temple. So Titusville, let's see, Titusville, where does it get its name?
The Titans.
Again, yeah, Titans too. Okay. Now also, I think Aleister Crowley would have liked this. The Windover Archaeological Site. That is Titusville. Seth, that's true.
The Windover Bog.
The Windover Bog. Here, let me pull this up.
I have an astrocartography line. I don't know if you're into astrocartography, but it goes right through that area, like the Space Coast, somewhere between Port St. Lucie and Windover.
Interesting. Astrocartography.
All right, y'all. We're gonna watch it. So the Windover site is one of the oldest human burials in America. Well-preserved human burials. I think they say over 100 individual bodies, well-preserved, were recovered from here. This was discovered in the 1980s because of like the bog conditions, like the swamp water, oxygen-free swamp water. Because of all the minerals, right? The Florida spring water, whatever. The bog water, mostly. It preserved all these bodies so well that when it was discovered in the 1980s, the people who discovered it called the police because they thought that it was a fresh, like serial killer dumping site.
It's like they died yesterday.
Yeah. And speaking of serial killers, you know who else spent time at FSU? Ted Bundy. There's a couple connections between Ted Bundy and Jim Morrison. But the Windover site was not only interesting because it had so many people so well preserved, they had brains in their skulls. 8,000 years old, they say. 8,000 years old. Corroborated not just by like the carbon dating, whatever. People don't believe in carbon dating. Okay. But the sea level rise and change too. There are sites just like this out in the ocean that are the same type of burial, same conditions, except now they're under ocean water. They're under the floor of the ocean. So that tells us, that kind of narrows down and solidifies the 8,000 year timeline, according to the sea level change that we've been told, right? So, I've got another little video here about what they found at the Windover site. And to Seth's point, they found some pretty tall people. Florida was home to a very large race of men. 500 years ago, when the Spanish conquistadors showed up, the people they found averaged about 6.5 feet tall. The men, the everyday person. And a 6.5 foot tall person, 6'6", they're huge. That's a really tall person. Big, big, big. Some of their chiefs, they say, were over 7 feet tall, over 8 feet tall, absurdly tall. Now, we all know about the Smithsonian cover-up and all this stuff. Blah, blah, blah. All right, let's watch this real quick. We got to get back to the doors.
Postcrania is kind of housed in these cabinets, and the crania is just around the corner. So just to kind of show you some of the ideas about the preservation. Right?
This is also relevant because these bones are housed at FSU. Jim Morrison went to FSU. And thank God for FSU not sending these bones to the Smithsonian to get lost forever. These might be the shortest bones for all we know. You know what I mean? Anything bigger than this might have already been sent to the Smithsonian.
Right. This is one of the males, adult males. That's absolutely massive. These individuals were very large, and preservation is just so immaculate that it's hard to believe that these are 8,000 years old. I mean, we've had researchers come in here and say, "Are you sure?"
Yeah, that thing's just a kangaroo bone.
A lot younger. So even just compared to me, right, in terms of a hip placement, my knee is up here, and I'm 5'11". So these are really large individuals. Right? And we have some with very unique traits.
You think the government using the Space Coast and sort of locking it down for like rocket science is partially to cover up any independent exploration of the water there and to find further like remains?
It absolutely could be. It totally could be. I know, a lot of the NASA craft and missions are named after Titans, and I'll tell you this, the connection that I did find between Houston and the Space Coast in Florida, the common thread between the ancient people who lived in both those areas, cannibalism.
Is that how you get big and strong?
Yeah, start eating people, folks.
Well, I don't think it hurts, but I'd say the shellfish, the spring water, the mineral. We know they ate a ton of shellfish, or at least they cracked open a ton of shells. We know they drank a ton of Florida spring water. Who knows? That's what the Smithsonian said. The Smithsonian said, yes, the Florida skeletons are the largest on Earth. Okay, but it's just because of the mineral water. So they gaslit people, but whatever. But that's Titusville. That's where Aleister Crowley's family lived. He visited them at least once. And Jim Morrison really, really liked Aleister Crowley. And a lot of people know that Aldous Huxley came up with, or he didn't come up with it, sorry. Everyone knows that Aldous Huxley wrote The Doors of Perception. But that title, he's quoting one of his favorite writers / poets, William Blake. William Blake originally coined, I believe, The Doors of Perception, that saying. And then Aldous Huxley quoted him and made it the title of his work. Now, why is that significant? Well, this fascination with Aleister Crowley is in every single part of the Doors music, and they're right down to their name. People say, "Oh, well, the Doors come from Aldous Huxley." Did you know that Aldous Huxley got his first, I think, mescaline dose with Aleister Crowley? Aldous Huxley had his first mescaline trip with Aleister Crowley. I think that's the right drug. I might have the drug wrong, but that's
I think it was mescaline. He wrote Doors of Perception about his experience on mescaline in 1953.
Well, Aleister Crowley was dead by then.
Well, I guess that's when the book came out.
Okay, good point. But at some point they met and they did drugs together. Aleister Crowley walked him through a trip, pretty much.
Interesting.
Now, the connection doesn't end there. Aleister Crowley believed that he was William Blake reincarnated. He believed he was William Blake, carrying on the same message, the same mission as William Blake. So that's a double Aleister Crowley reference in the name of the Doors themselves. Then we have an album cover of the Doors with Aleister Crowley on it. So we have the same level of Beatles Crowley infiltration with Aleister Crowley on the Sgt. Pepper album cover twice. I think it's Morrison Hotel. I could be wrong. I'm going to go look it up, but what do you guys think about that?
At this time, Crowley was just dominating a lot of the intelligence circles because he had the kind of magic that they were looking for, apparently, the kind that resonated with them. And so he definitely had his effect culturally across probably any band from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more to occult area to Aldous Huxley than we're led to believe. It's, he kind of only goes to the level of a kind of trippy author that has dabbled in psychedelics, but he lived in America for a long time, and what the hell was he doing living in California? And
right.
He was a big pusher of the LSD. Like Timothy Leary and him were big pushers of promoting LSD and psychedelics.
Well, apparently Huxley was an advisor to Timothy Leary at Harvard.
I didn't know that. I knew they were linked through the LSD thing. I didn't know they were that closely linked.
Yeah, no, you're right about like really highlighting Huxley's role in disseminating LSD during the 1950s and 60s, right when it was taken off. And this music, like the Laurel Canyon scene, was just a huge part of that as well. And while we're at it, like Huxley,
I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick.
do your thing.
Hit it.
Huxley, so we've talked about this before, but he died tripping balls on November 22nd, 1963, which is the same day that JFK was assassinated.
Dang.
And it's also the same cusp that Dr. Longo and I share a birthday. And we've decoded like the symbolism of why November 22nd. It's, you know, it combines the essence of Scorpio and Sagittarius together. But we're going to see this birthday, or this date come up again. So Huxley was a part of a huge British intelligence family.
He is. I think so too. It's just like been so buried in so beautifully, like him, and also C.S. Lewis going off on like another. I don't know if you've looked into him at all, but apparently he's been super like pseudo-Christian, you know, actually occult. But I don't really know. He seems like he has good intentions, but they all do, you know. Who knows?
Yeah. So just going back to Huxley, Aldous Huxley, his grandfather Thomas Henry was known as Darwin's bulldog. So he worked right alongside Charles Darwin, and basically took his work and popularized it and like wrote a bunch of it. Turns out Thomas Henry Huxley's granddaughter married Charles Darwin's grandson. So they like really kept it within the family. They were super tight, the Darwins and the Huxleys. And so, yeah, another one of T.H. Huxley's grandchildren was Aldous. He also had a brother named Julian Huxley. Now, Julian Huxley is
I've
huge.
heard of Julian, the eugenics, right?
Eugenics, and he coined the term transhumanism. He also wrote the first United Nations manifesto. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's a total globalist, transhumanist, evolutionist tool. And their whole family kind of was. Even Aldous, who, like you said, was just kind of this trippy writer, you know, he was really responsible for getting a lot of the LSD propaganda out there. And everybody knows Brave New World. Everybody needs to read that book if they haven't already. But I also recommend, if you haven't read it, Brave New World Revisited, which he wrote a couple decades after Brave New World. And this is basically his reflection on what he wrote in Brave New World coming to fruition quicker than he thought it was going to be. So Brave New World came out in 1931, and he said by 1956, all the stuff I was writing about is already pretty much taking place. All the eugenics, all the transhumanism.
Yeah. Can I fill in one comment there?
Please.
Another link between Jim and Aldous Huxley. Seth's right. Aldous Huxley is famous for predicting rave culture and predicting like not only the promiscuity that goes along with it, but
designer drugs and stuff.
Yep. Drugs being popularized, normalized, and how all the young people would be kind of directed by the government into like regular orgy sessions in order to kind of just keep them normal and keep them from kind of going and having like a regular relationship. They just kind of have group sex, state mandated, drug induced, music induced. Music would be played by like a robot on the wall, like a smart house, like a smart home would be playing the music. I mean, me and Austin have been to a couple house parties just like that. Okay, I mean,
well, dude,
life in color, dude.
Thanks for warning us, Aldous. We're terrified.
This is a huge theme.
Okay.
You're not exaggerating. Like, this is an actual part of the plot of the Brave New World. Like, this happens in the book, and this came out in 1931. So these controllers are already thinking about this in the 1920s, 100 years ago. So, if there's any question as to, is our culture being programmed? Yeah, it has been for a very, very, very long time.
Yes. Also, so the Aldous Huxley, he promoted rave culture. He said, you know, he's writing it like fiction, but he's essentially saying there's going to be light shows like you can't resist, sexuality promoted to you like you can't believe,
Yeah.
drug induced, orgiastic behavior. The only thing we're missing so far that I thought he was very interesting for kind of theorizing about, smells. He believed that smell would be a key element in like the pop culture mind control. He said that there would be arpeggios of smell to accompany the music.
Yes.
Like when there's a tense part of the song, there'd be like a, maybe a spicier or even a slightly off-putting smell to tense you up. And then on the sweet parts of the songs, there'd be, lavender. And he says arpeggios of smell, which is like a really psychedelic way of thinking about smell.
Mhm.
And I don't think we've seen that fully come to fruition yet. But we're
No.
really close to it with all the
Yeah.
soy candles and all this shit. Like,
Well, they know about nephrology, the studying of the brain. There's 12 cranial nerves that connect directly to the brain, and the first one, cranial nerve number 1, is the olfactory nerve. So it's like the biggest one, and it's directly to the brain. It's so
Yeah.
much tied to memory and nostalgia, and like
Okay.
they know that if they can manipulate smell, which, like you said, they probably haven't fully figured it out, or maybe they have in some subversive ways we don't even know about.
Maybe
then
they don't
they
need
could really
to,
manipulate our
They already
consciousness.
got our asses.
Yeah, through everything else.
Yeah.
Well, the connection there with Huxley and Jim Morrison again is that, like we're saying, Huxley's famous for predicting this in a very descriptive kind of explicit terms. Jim Morrison, and that largely came true. In our time, it's certainly true. But Jim Morrison was part of the earliest wave of music festival culture. The Doors were some of the earliest big names on some of the big festivals that preceded Woodstock, and I think the Doors turned down Woodstock, or they couldn't get there. They were almost there, from what I've heard, but I don't think they were there. I don't know the Woodstock lineup, but I don't think they were there. But they turned it down, from what I've heard. So that was coming to fruition. The music festival culture, the group sex, in the back of Volkswagen vans, and getting knocked up, and heroin addicted single moms. That wasn't a thing, before Woodstock, really. And there's a lot of good that comes out of the Woodstock culture and stuff, but it's always being guided. The reins were always going back to this, either in Woodstock's case, a Zionist, Brazilian supremacist operation, believe it or not, the Woodstock thing. But with the other music festivals, like a Grateful Dead, CIA, LSD experiment, and the Doors were at some of the first big music festivals, 60s music festivals. Okay. Well, from there, Jim takes it a step further, and maybe echoing Aldous Huxley, maybe not. Jim's famous for another reason. He's also credited for predicting DJ culture, taking it a step further, saying that, not just festivals. He would talk about the festivals. Oh, we love this. It's so great. No one gets in any trouble. Everything's great here. But then he himself makes a prediction about DJs. He says, like, very soon, one person's going to be able to control the whole band. One person's going to do everything. And with, they'll be able to sample, and I forget the exact quote, but I'm paraphrasing. He
It's
predicted
in one of his songs, right? When he's just like speaking. He's like, it'd be so crazy if one day, you can just modulate the sounds, and you won't
It's
even
an
need
interview.
the band.
Predicts EDM. Let's watch it. Another thing that jumped out to me, we'll get back to those lyrics. Another thing that jumped out to me is how little the Doors talk about space. everyone else in the psychedelia scene, it seems, was talking about space. Did Jim's insights as a member of a military family, did he know that shit was all fake or what? Was he so close to the launch site that he knew that shit was fake? Because the Doors never talked about space. Jimi Hendrix, space was in like a ton of his songs. He was also in the military, by the way, Jimi Hendrix. But you guys want to watch this?
I was talking about that this weekend, thinking a lot about it. I think the two.
This is Jim Morrison, The Future of Music. Shout out to Summer Vibe. All credit to Summer Vibe.
Two basic types of music indigenous to this country are the black music, blues, and the kind of folk music that was brought over from Europe, and what I guess they call it country music, or the kind of West Virginia high and lonesome sound. Those are the two main streams of root American music. There might be others, I don't know, but it looks like, and like 10 years ago, what they called rock and roll was kind of a blending of those two forms. And I guess what's happening now is that rock is kind of dying out, and everyone is going back to the roots again. Some are going back into country, and some are going back into basic blues. I guess in 4 or 5 years, the new generation's music will be, it'll have a synthesis of those two elements and some third thing. It'll be entire, maybe it'll be, it might rely heavily on electronics, tapes. I can kind of envision maybe one person with a lot of machines, tapes, and electronic setups, singing or speaking and using machines.
I used to think that rock was progressive.
Yeah, there's another interview that's audio only where he talks about it a little bit more like that too. But interesting. And that's kind of maybe a little bit of a callback to Aldous Huxley, predicting the future of what he saw music to be. Another connection between Jim Morrison and Aldous Huxley was their infatuation with Native American culture. Aldous Huxley taking mescaline. Mescaline's like a Native American drug, if I'm not mistaken. It's a cactus, right? It comes from the cactus.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, he kind of paints this picture of the savage, like the last living. Sorry, I got a loop here. The last living wild man, who's not even like a Native American, but he uses Native Americans as like a metaphor, to represent the savage in his story, or vice versa. If you don't take part in this technocratic, dystopian, orgy culture, like caste system type thing in Brave New World, you had to go live in the reservation, in the wild reservation.
The savage reservation, yeah.
Yeah, the savages who lived out in the woods, and they lived in like wood houses and shit. And they weren't even that, they weren't like in the Stone Age or anything. They were just behind, they chose not to partake in the system. So they'd be treated like Native Americans. People would you could take a tour, take pictures of them. And Jim kind of has a infatuation with Native Americans that maybe has a little something to do with that Aldous Huxley, Native American thing.
Isn't there a story too that Jim got in a car accident on a Native American reservation, and he wrote about that later in life?
Yep, forgive me, for those who don't know kind of more of the Jim Morrison lore, he claimed to be possessed by a Native American shaman, the spirit of a Native American shaman. who jumped into his body when he was on a trip with his family, Jim. He witnessed a car accident or witnessed the aftermath of a car accident where a truck full of Indians like tipped over and a couple Indians died. Jesus Christ, bro.
Yeah,
What's
this
up,
guy's,
Dad
this
bod?
guy's something up his booty hole, don't he?
Yo, dad bod, dude.
Just
You on
turn
your
it into a summer bod, will you?
you on your period or something, dude? What's up with this lady? Come on, bro.
Listen, all the stuff you're saying, we know, dude. Get a clue, all right?
Okay.
This is some deep gravy too. I mean, about the Native American, possessing Jim Morrison.
He's yeah, so he believed that he was, because he witnessed the death or like the passing of this Native American, he believed that that energy, that spirit jumped into him and took over him. And that's why he has these Native American kind of moves, like dance moves. If you've ever seen him, he would study. Jim Morrison was obsessed with the Third Reich. He was obsessed with like Nazi Germany, and he was obsessed with Native Americans. And when he was at UCLA as a film student, which is where he met Ray Manzarek, the keyboardist, he made a movie. His student project movie was like spliced footage of World War II, Germany, World War II, and Native American like rituals, like dances, And he did like spoken word poetry on top of it. And there was a video of like him smoking weed in it too. And it was radical, right?
Freaking occult, bro.
Yeah, very occult and very Aleister Crowley coded a little bit. Because Aleister Crowley apparently going to the whole military intelligence thing. Apparently Aleister Crowley was 007, carrying on the legacy of people like John Dee, occultists, magicians like John Dee, acting as secret agents, as spies for different crowns, right? Royal families. Aleister Crowley loved those stories about John Dee and Francis Bacon and these occult-minded people getting into like the politics and the geopolitics and starting wars and going behind enemy lines, spying. Aleister Crowley loved that stuff, and he did that in like a little bit around World War I, not really, but in World War II, apparently, he was very involved with military intelligence. Some people think him and Winston Churchill are the same person, or that Winston apparently. Now this is true. Apparently, Aleister Crowley was consulted by Winston Churchill's like PR team to decide which gesture would become his trademark gesture. And apparently, this is a claim, Aleister Crowley chose Winston Churchill's V for victory symbol. Now, if you've ever heard Winston Churchill talk, and if you've ever heard Aleister Crowley talk, they sound exactly alike. Creepy voice, creepy British voice. It's super witchy.
You think Aleister Crowley pulled like a Colin Farrell and the Penguin, put like a different fat suit on and just like started smoking? I mean, maybe he already did smoke cigars, but
well, as we're going to see, that's not far-fetched, is for someone to die, fake their death, and then become somebody else.
Yeah, David Bowie, dude.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Jim Morrison.
Let's see. I mean, we talked about Ray a little bit. Ray was in the...
Before we move, I want to say one thing about the Jim Morrison predicting EDM culture and sort of how he came to this knowledge about someone's going to have tapes and machines and be directing music just with one person. We have to mention the producer for the Doors. He produced the first few records, and his house, he had a house on Lookout Mountain in Laurel Canyon, which became sort of the hub for a lot of these 60s and 70s bands of the superstars. So he's a sort of a central hub for this scene. His name's Paul Allen Rothschild. Longo looks up, and he produced a few of the records. Apparently he was pretty controlling over what type of equipment they would use. Like, he wouldn't let the guitar player use the wah-wah pedal, for example. It's like one story I read on Wikipedia was that Rothschild, he was very particular about the equipment and how the sound was going to be. So I do think, and also Robbie's dad, having been working at the Rand Corporation, they're probably researching and developing sonic warfare or like subliminal warfare, using music, using speakers, using sound and pop culture. So I think he was a huge axis of control here when it came to the Doors and when it came to other bands in the Laurel Canyon scene.
Definitely. They had different points of control. They had like the audio engineers, they had the drug guys, they had the black magicians, all the definitely a controlled op here, boys, right? To a degree.
Yeah. Hang on. Sorry.
Yeah, it's so hard too to determine like what are the exact mechanisms of control here. Like, how exactly are these people getting their hands in the pot? It's like we don't really know
Satan, that's how it is. And freaking just worshiping the Lord of Darkness.
Well, I mean, yeah, the dark arts is a huge part of it,
Snape style.
Now let's take a look at this. Just to strengthen the link between Aleister Crowley and Jim Morrison, here's a picture of Jim with his kind of hands resting over a bust or like sculpture.
Yeah, what is that?
Of Aleister Crowley.
What?
It's a little poopy pile.
That's supposed to be
shit to look like.
This is acknowledged by the Doors to have been Aleister Crowley.
He's like, yes, this is my bust.
Mm-hmm.
It was gifted to me by the praying man.
And then in more, people say that they can see Aleister Crowley's face in Morrison Hotel too. Let's see if that's in like a reflection or something.
Jimmy Page probably owns that now.
I think it's like right there or something. You have to have like the real album in your hand, but apparently there's a faint image of Aleister Crowley.
You got to be tripping on LSD too.
Yeah, but you can see that there's this weird like mark. They're in front of a window, and the window has like a marking on it right there, and it's similar to that effect. It's either up here, I can see a little bit of a face, or right there. But yeah, so
it says the Doors and they're in a window. What's going on? Sorry, they claim what?
Nothing. That's it. Oh. Just that. So there's that one picture of him with an Aleister Crowley sculpture. But there's another connection to Aleister Crowley that most people overlook. Aleister Crowley faked his own death at one point in his life. Jim Morrison is alleged to have faked his own death. Now we're going to get into that in a little bit. But let's see, what else is there to say about like the California scene before we get into his death? Anything about his music? Oh, we got to talk about his arrest too in Miami first.
I mean, yeah, the scene itself, they were all, I feel like they all had their different missions. Like the military families we've gone into, how like frequently these big stars have not just military family, but high up military. Like Jim's dad was an admiral. Like Janis Joplin's dad was like in the Navy. You can
And even
list them all down, you know.
even like aristocracy, like David Crosby's family tree included the
Oh,
Van
yeah,
Cortlands, the Van Rensselaers, and the Van
Well-
Schuyler families.
You know, apparently Dave Crosby hated the Doors, hated Jim, and hated Ray Manzarek. Hated him because he was
Yeah,
jealous.
Totally, I could see that. They were
Well, here.
stealing it.
This is from the Dutch guy on YouTube, Jim Morrison's Miss Clearwater, 1963. This is one of Jim's early girlfriends, like love interests, who apparently some songs are about.
And this is before the Doors.
Yes. Mary Werber. She was Miss Clearwater, 1963. But so, guys, the Doors played. They kind of pioneered the hippie psychedelic sound. I think it's way better than a lot of the other flower power shit. I think the Doors have a little bit more testosterone to them and all this stuff. But so blah blah blah. The Doors, great band. Robbie Krieger. It's worth noting Robbie Krieger, the guitarist. Not only was he well connected, he was also Jewish.
Oh,
Whatever. Maybe something, maybe nothing.
maybe it's just a coincidence.
Can't leave it out though. You know, can't leave it out. And then also, you know, their music was good. They played for like 4 years, 5 years, and then in 1970, I think they got in trouble. Jim Morrison was playing in Miami.
It was 1969.
1969.
What a year.
So, the Miami incident, let's look it up. During a concert on March 1st, there's another, I got to show this picture too. Jim was arrested when he was a teenager in Tallahassee. So let me show you that one first. He was arrested for getting drunk at an FSU football game. Oh, and we didn't watch the video for FSU.
He's looking filled out here, you know.
He was a burly boy for a little bit, but that's his mugshot from college. He was drunk at a football game, apparently.
That's his mugshot.
That's his baby picture.
This is the video of him promoting FSU. He was in an FSU promotional film.
For this eager boy,
This is from the Florida State Archives.
Damn, look at those gums.
it will move him closer to his university career.
He's already doing like speaker engineering.
Yo, that was crazy. He was like soldering.
Will his parents have been sufficiently interested in his future to have concerned themselves with the needs of their universities?
Hang on.
We regret to inform you that we are unable to accept your application.
Let's see him pull that out of the mailbox one more time.
In his future, will his parents have been sufficiently interested in his future to have concerned themselves with the needs of their universities?
We regret to inform you that we are unable to accept your application.
Darn
Unless
it.
we face facts today, this could happen to many Florida boys and girls tomorrow. For in 10 years, roughly 3 times as many of your sons and daughters will be seeking admission to Florida's state universities. What will we answer them?
We'd like to accept you. Indeed, we'd like to offer more courses, more sections, but we just don't have the space. That together with lack of professors.
But what happened? How come my parents or the state or the university didn't look ahead?
Wow, what the
Looking
hell?
ahead,
Terrible actor.
Planning ahead, that's just what the university has been doing. That's the reason for studies such as this one.
Deep state music.
What would the young man have found beyond these gates had he been accepted? A university reaching out for greatness. Buildings,
This is crazy.
repositories of the world's knowledge. The essential space where education takes place. Space that must grow as enrollments grow.
Yeah, and then boom, he gets arrested.
Dude, I would
at
have too.
FSU.
Get away from that shit. His daddy making him like do a PSA as like punishment for like having sex in college. He's like, Jim, you're gonna go on and do a PSA for the school. Tell everybody how you didn't get in. He was like,
Yeah,
just
who knows?
Like the
They
CIA talk.
They could have
Like
made him
that
do
voice
that.
they
Yeah.
have.
They might have made him do it to like get out of trouble. Could be.
Yeah, they always use their children in these campaigns and operations.
It's a tale as old as time.
All right, guys. He was like 19 in that video. And the Doors played, and he died at 27. But in 1969, during a concert on March 1st, 1969, at the Dinner Key Auditorium, Coconut Grove Convention Center, a visibly intoxicated Morrison attempted to spark a riot in the audience, in part by screaming, "You wanna see my cock?" and other obscenities. 3 days later, 6 warrants for his arrest were issued by the Dade County Public Safety Department for indecent exposure, among other accusations. Consequently, many of the Doors' scheduled concerts were canceled. On September 20th, 1970, Morrison was convicted of indecent exposure, a profanity, by a 6-person jury in Miami after a 16-day trial. Morrison, who attended the October 30th sentencing, quote, in a wool jacket adorned with Indian designs.
Badass.
Silently listened as he was sentenced to 6 months in prison and had to pay a $500 fine. However, Morrison remained free on a $50,000 bond while the verdict was being appealed. At the sentencing, Judge Murray Goodman told Morrison that he was a, quote, person graced with a talent, admired by many of his peers. Interviewed by Bob Chorish of the LA Free Press, Morrison expressed both bafflement and clarity about the Miami incident. Yeah, one of you guys want to read this? Can you
I
read
wasted a lot of time and energy with the Miami trial, about 1.5 years, but I guess it was a valuable experience because before the trial, I had a very unrealistic schoolboy attitude about the American judicial system. My eyes have been opened up a bit. There were guys down there, black guys, that would go each day before I went on. It took about 5 minutes and they would get 20 or 25 years in jail. If I hadn't had unlimited funds to continue fighting my case, I'd be in jail right now for 3 years. It's just if you have money, you generally don't go to jail. Yeah, he was connected, you know. That's crazy. His trial went on for 16 months. Imagine just playing the tape over and over again of him calling people slaves and stuff. But I think he recognized an inherent problem with the judicial system. They treat people differently. You know, if you're connected, if your dad is somebody, you know, your sentence doesn't get full weight.
Oh, yeah. It's so corrupt.
This is from Alexander de Gothia on YouTube. Shout out to him. Old video. Let's watch this. This is apparently footage from the proceedings or during, around it.
Swagged out.
So, yeah. Dade County Courthouse. There's the drummer of the band. There's the keyboardist and the guitarist.
They could have been making an example out of him too. You know, what could they have stood to teach the public by airing this for so long? Kind of like how they air a lot of the celebrity trials today.
Mm-hmm. Like humiliation rituals and stuff.
Well, he was actually enacting an ancient Enochian invocation ritual. If those dang Miami PD hadn't stopped him, he would have spunked out a couple demons on stage there. So
the invocation of the one-eyed trouser snake.
He's like, You want to see my cock? You want to see my L. Ron Hubbard? Come on, people.
And also, this is toward the end of his career. And we're going to get to his death in a little bit. But like, was he actually spiraling out of control? Was he actually an alcoholic? Or was that all a show to lead up for a faked death?
Well, it's you kind of got to pick which fake death story you're going with to make sense of it, because I think the best, the greatest, the one that makes the most sense is that Jim didn't want to go to prison for 6 months. He didn't want to have to pay this money back. It was going to be super hard for the Doors to tour again under this. People forgot about this because he died, right? He was like branded a criminal at this point. And the Doors were banned from playing a lot of places. Women parents were like burning their kids' records and stuff like that. This was a big deal. And he had another thing up in Rhode Island or Boston where he was, charged with inciting a riot, things like that. So this could have ended up really bad for him. And apparently he just didn't want to deal with it. And this is part of the theory that he faked his own death to at least get out of this, to at least just kind of, I'll deal with it later. Some people think that he died after faking his death. And that's why he never came back, But so we're going to get into all the different possible candidates because there's a whole lot more of that. Who was he? I know Seth's got a whole lot to say on that too. But this is the context. These are the conditions under which Jim Morrison disappeared and then was discovered dead mysteriously in Paris.
Allegedly. So, and just on the point of faking your own death, we're going to watch a couple videos of people close to Jim saying, yeah, if anyone could have faked their own death, it was him. But before we get into that, we got to talk about how that's another link to Aleister Crowley. Around 10 years before his death, Aleister Crowley, or I don't know, 17 years, 15 years before his death, around there, in the 30s, Aleister Crowley faked his own death. He did so with the help of a poet and... Let me pull that up.
And a leather helmet.
I've got a link here, sorry. But yeah, so Aleister Crowley faked his own death with the help of a poet. And the poet said, I was the last person to see him. I saw him a couple days ago or a couple hours ago. And then he just went missing. And Aleister Crowley went missing close to a place called Boca de Inferno, I think. Or Diablo. It's either mouth of the devil or mouth of hell. The mouth of hell or mouth of the devil.
Yeah, Inferno is hell.
Yeah, but I don't remember. It's Boca de Inferno or Boca de Diablo, something like that. And so that's where Aleister Crowley went missing. And apparently that had like a symbolism to it, He went missing near the mouth of hell, right? Or people said he committed suicide. That was another theory. Well, I don't know, a couple months later or a year later or something, there was a art exhibition hosted in honor of Aleister Crowley, where people who missed him kind of wanted to honor him while he was gone. And they hosted this art exhibit. And guess what? All these people who knew Aleister Crowley or respected him a lot, they're all there kind of mourning him together, celebrating his work and stuff. Aleister Crowley comes walking in. Surprises all these people who thought he was dead. That was a ritual to him. That was a magical act. Like that was not only like stage magic, like tricking someone. but that symbolized so much. It represented so much. There's so much metaphor you can fit in there, right? That's kind of how the occultists look at things like that, you know, so much performance art. Yeah.
I don't know how true this is, but apparently to reach some sort like above the 33rd degree, you know, going beyond the listed degrees of whatever orders they're in, like faking a death or something like that is something that is like gets you to the next level. Because we see this with so many artists like Nipsey Hussle. I never really got into him, but apparently like that was like a huge Freemasonic faked death or like ritual death. And David Bowie with it and his album Lazarus, his last album before his death was like Lazarus, which is, you know, like the
Black Star.
angel that comes back to life or like the dead. The theme is resurrecting the dead.
Yeah, it's a form of trickery, black magic. You know, it's fooling somebody so bad that, you know, they think you've passed on and they're living under a false reality. And we see that these occultists do that all the time. They try to do it to us. We see through because we watch Old World Florida.
I think they're so cute.
So he faked his own death and apparently 3 weeks later showed up at an art exhibition in Berlin.
Nice.
So Mouth of Hell, Boca de Inferno in Portugal. Now, what's interesting is we might hear Ray Manzarek tell it in a clip here shortly. But Jim Morrison had faked his death inadvertently once before. The Doors had just played a show or something. They were all at a party and Jim was separate. And apparently there was a car crash or someone came in and said, guys, there was a car crash. Jim Morrison's dead, like down the street or on the other side of town. And apparently the band believed it when they heard that. And the band fully thought that Jim was dead for a couple seconds, couple minutes, hours. Then Jim shows up to the party. And when he hears that they thought he was dead, he doesn't act shocked. He just hits he hits him with like a Mark Twain quote. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. Rumors of my death. You know, you heard about my death, but it was exaggerated. You know, I didn't actually die.
That's some good foreshadowing.
Might have gotten an idea there, right?
Yeah.
Might have been testing the waters, you know, testing the reaction.
Dipping his toe in.
Seeing how his friends, because that's his chance to see how his friends would really react to him. To, you know, he could almost get like his part of the grieving out of the way, like seeing how his friends would react to thinking he was really dead, getting to see him again. Who knows? But that's a real story, and I think we'll hear Ray tell it himself. But okay. Aleister Crowley faked his own death. That's pretty much it. Let's just go balls deep on who we think it is. Seth, where's the first place to go? What do you think is the most mainstream or most common thread? And then we can kind of go from there.
For Jim Morrison, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So the most mainstream one, the one that most people will know, is Rush Limbaugh, conservative, talking head, radio host.
Yeah.
He came into his career in 1975. Jim allegedly died in 1971. So that's a good few years to be able to prep this new role. And I think the word role, I don't want to understate the word role, because a lot of times people are assigned different roles to play on the world stage. And, so you can see, because we saw in a few pictures, we even commented, Jim was a burly guy. He had some chub on him early, as a child.
He's a Sagittarius, and Sagittariuses are known to swell up real fast and get skinny real fast. Jim, like a horse.
Is Rush
Jim
Limbaugh
was like that.
Also a Sag?
No, they said he was.
You motherfucker.
No, I don't think so. But so, and then if you look up like last pictures of Jim Morrison, like his latest photos before he died, he was fat. Like he had fat on him, so people attribute that to the alcoholism. And then if you look up pictures of Rush Limbaugh early, if you just type like Rush Limbaugh early and then hit images, there's really nothing. There's really no photos of an early life of this guy.
Oh,
There is one photo of his high school picture, his high school yearbook picture. Looks like Jim Morrison to me.
It's just Jim Morrison.
No, it looks like a clean cut, chubby faced Jim Morrison. And so
That's cool.
I could see how they did a little bit of surgery on the nose, but they kind of have the same teeth. They have similar markings on their face. So
And
most
also-
people think that this is what happened. I don't know. I'm not putting myself in this camp. This is one of the theories, and it's like it's the most popular one, but there are others.
Doctor, look up his ear, Rush Limbaugh's ear. He wears this, I don't think it's a hearing aid, it might be, but he had this weird thing I always used to see behind his ear. What if that was like holds his mask on? It's like a little suit thingy. But if you look it up real quick, you could see like there's like a device that's like always connected to his ear, like the back of it.
Yeah, that's I think it's just when he's older, he was hard of hearing, I think, which could be a consequence of being the lead singer of a rock band, blaring speakers, you know.
I don't think it was a hearing aid though, is what I'm saying. But he had an inner ear disease.
I also misrepresented myself on the stream a couple weeks ago, apparently, because I don't think John Lennon is Steve Jobs. I brought that up as a idea that people think it's true. I don't believe that. I'm not gonna put myself in that camp, guys.
I've been getting a lot of backlash.
Well, so guys, the theory, keep in mind, the theory is not that Jim Morrison in his, the sexiest version of himself just chose to give it all up and become Rush Limbaugh. The theory is that he was slowly losing like musical ability. He kind of, his bag of tricks was kind of empty, the Doors could be a little repetitive, and Jim wanted to switch over to like written word and spoken word. That's a theory. And that he was gaining a ton of weight, and it was, tough. He was drinking a lot. Rush Limbaugh is covered in like liver spots, big drinkers thing. That could be those Irish genes, that patchy skin from drinking, right? Rush Limbaugh had that. Now, the theory is that Jim just kept getting fatter and less interested in music and more interested in politics. Why? Because his dad was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, And apparently his dad got kind of framed or shafted a little bit, or kind of had to bite the bullet and take the blame for a couple things. That might have rubbed the family the wrong way. But, there's various theories with different motivations for why he would become Rush Limbaugh. But there's one big connection that we got to talk about. Jim Morrison was obsessed with radio. He loved radio, and he made at least 2 of his songs sound like they were on a radio station. The WASP, or Texas Radio, what's it called? WASP/Texas Radio, the Big Beat, the songs built like it's like you're listening to a radio station, and Jim's almost pretending to be a
like an old timey radio sound.
Yeah, like a disc jockey almost, Then there's another song that he has, or kind of a spoken word thing, where he's talking about a couple songs. You can almost like hear a car start up and like radio start, LA Woman. I think at the beginning he starts the car. But then there's a spoken word song where he talks about listening to the radio, getting lost in the radio and all this stuff, being on long drives with the radio. So he has this one song that's very much like he's pretending to be a radio station host. And then there you go,
Yeah.
And another thing real quick, Josh Homme, who's the singer guitarist for the Queens of the Stone Age, is infatuated with Jim Morrison. That's his number one guy. He loves Jim Morrison. Now, what's interesting is their biggest album, Songs for the Deaf, was built as if you're on a drive through the desert and you're listening to radio the whole time. And he was very inspired by Jim Morrison. It's hard to think that wasn't a direct influence from Jim.
That's
Sorry.
a cool link. No, that's a
Seth.
cool link. I want to say that initially, before I like really dove deep into this, I wasn't convinced. I kind of preliminarily looked at the evidence and I was just like, it's not that compelling to me. And then the more I looked into it, the more compelling it got. When I looked into Rush Limbaugh's family and tried to look up pictures of his family, his brothers don't really look like anything like him. David Scott Limbaugh doesn't look like Rush III. And there's no wiki page for his dad, Rush Limbaugh II. And so it just gets, when you start covering up evidence and he doesn't look like his brothers, and, it could have easily been planted this new character into this family and then manipulated all the media around it to just make the story all check out. But, having no pictures of Rush Limbaugh as a child, you can look up any political commentator who's famous, who's been on air as much as Rush was, and you can find pictures of their childhood. And this is one thing where if I can't see pictures of a building being built, during a time when photography was invented, or if I can't see pictures of someone's childhood, it just raises red flags. I'm not saying this is a smoking gun, but it's a red flag, right? So those are two big things. Just not really looking like the other Limbaughs, and his dad having no Wikipedia page, although he is. So that one right there, that's the youngest picture we're going to have of Rush Limbaugh. This is quote unquote high school yearbook photo. It looks like a clean cut fat Jim Morrison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like Jim Morrison in his college apology video.
Yeah. Remember, guys, it's like Jim just let go of himself and just stopped caring about being a rock guy. And this was like a comfortable thing for him to do. He got to talk, got to express himself.
And you give him a nose job. That's the other thing. People are going to go, oh, he doesn't look like him. Yeah. You go a little surgery. You take off the mole on the face. So Jim Morrison had a mole right next to his nose. And Rush Limbaugh has a scar exactly where that mole was. Makes you wonder.
He looks like he's had a nose job in that picture. Like he looks like he had like a little Courtney Cox or like a Jennifer Aniston tuck job.
His nose looks like too small for his face almost.
Well,
like
the most damning thing is a video of Rush Limbaugh singing Jim Morrison. Let's watch this, guys. This is the one that did it for me. Not saying I'm all the way convinced, but this is the one that made me.
I don't think it's him, but
that made me take it seriously. Okay, this is part of the Rush Limbaugh show, and it's a euthanasia segment. Euthanasia. We'll review this at the end.
The kids are wondering.
The YouTube channel we got this is Intelligence Services. Thanks, Intelligence Services.
Nice. Can you give us more?
Edutainment purposes only. Shout out to them. Okay.
Where's the teacher?
How about euthanasia update? New update, ladies and gentlemen, inaugurated today on the EIB network. This is the euthanasia update.
Beautiful friend.
Alex Jones just copied this guy's voice 100%.
This is the end. My only friend in the end.
Doo-doo.
This will be a short one, so be ready on the close.
Again. This is the
Our euthanasia update, ladies and gentlemen, will chronicle all of the right to kill cases that are now pockmarking our society.
Now think about what he's talking about.
Right to kill.
What is euthanasia? What is euthanasia? It's dying early. It's choosing to die. It's choosing to leave the world. Double meaning there, a little tongue-in-cheek, reference. Could be, could not be. But
Yeah.
I see enough of a resemblance. Again, it would take a little bit of surgery, but I don't think he was singing the best he could. I think he's kind of joking, right? But who knows? Let's also
Yeah, we
watch
can't
this.
take
That
anything off the table these days.
now the
right?
theory that Trump is Elvis, right? People really had a field day with this because Trump gave Rush Limbaugh a presidential freedom award. So let's watch this. When he got diagnosed with cancer.
He's like, Rush, you're my favorite. Rush, you're great. Can you
Almost
hear me?
every American family knows the pain when a loved one is
This is from Fox, live now from Fox.
diagnosed with a serious illness. Here tonight is a special man, beloved by millions of Americans, who just received a stage 4 advanced cancer diagnosis.
He's saying it like
This
he's
is
proud of
not
him.
good news.
Yeah, dude, look at Nancy Pelosi in the back pretending she's
Is that
reading.
he is the greatest fighter.
Fucking lizard.
God damn.
Pence is constipated for 4
Yeah.
weeks.
Dude, Pence is like, please give me a fart here. Give me a little
Fighter
too.
and winner that you will ever meet. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for your decades of tireless devotion.
Now, you know what I noticed? Okay, watch the guy behind him and watch him step real quick. What symbol do you notice behind? And I don't know what building this is, so maybe the symbol was there. But notice the symbols, people. Because Jim Morrison loved that symbol, by the way.
Is that like a
Is that he is the
shamanic
greatest
symbol?
fighter and winner that you will ever meet. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for your decades of tireless devotion to our country.
He's like, fuck you. He's like, fuck you, Trump. He's like, Melania, yeah, she gave me a hand job right after the speech. My stage 4 cancer.
And Rush, in recognition of all that you have done for our nation, the millions of people a day that you speak to and that you inspire, and all of the incredible work that you have done for charity, I am proud to announce tonight that you will be receiving our country's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
He's like, what?
Yeah. He's like,
where am I?
He's like, all right. He dies like a week later. It's like, all right, sick. Ooh, shake it off.
He's got that like aloof look, like Jim had, you know?
Oh, do you see the double device on each ear? I didn't know you had
Yeah.
one on both. Yeah, that thing's
I
keeping
will
his
now
skin
ask
suit on.
the First Lady of the United States to present you with the honor, please.
Look at those.
Now, just real quick.
ears, dude.
Just real quick. Is a radio host really that important? I don't think so.
Well, if he's pushing the conservative values that the president wants, maybe. But I agree with you. It's like he's a radio host. Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's got to be something deeper to this.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably like the chief propagandist for a while, you know, and then it went to like Hannity and then freaking like Glenn Beck, you know.
Yeah, you're right. He probably served a big role for military intelligence.
It's like the Goebbels for Obama.
Also, let me know when is a good time to talk about when Family Guy talked about Rush Limbaugh being replaced twice.
Didn't know that.
Or not replaced, but being a replacement.
Rush and Catherine, congratulations. Thank you, Catherine. As we pray for all who are sick.
Okay. Give me 1 sec here. Well, Seth, go ahead. Talk about it.
Yeah, so in Family Guy, we know that show is famous for like predicting things, right? Because the writers are high level occultists, Freemasons, whatever. So apparently, I haven't seen these episodes, but I read about them. Lois worked for Fox in an episode called Foxy Lady, and she reported that Rush Limbaugh was secretly Fred Savage. And then in another episode, there's basically like a kind of a quick joke, throwaway joke. But in another episode later, there's a show about Rush Limbaugh and how he befriends Brian and all this stuff. And so basically, they see that Rush Limbaugh is on TV and he's going to come and do an event in Quahog. And Chris is confused because he thought Rush Limbaugh was replaced or secretly was Fred Savage. And so he says that. He goes, wait, I thought he was somebody else, like you reported, Mom. And so it's interesting that it was brought up that Rush Limbaugh was a replacement or is a replacement. I mean, I know it's a fictional cartoon, whatever. But again, this is a show that historically predicts the future and has some serious truth bombs in it. So it's interesting to me that that the episode about Rush involves him, a nod to him being a replacement. So, and again, I'm not completely sold on this theory. It's very compelling, though. I will say that.
Yeah, they put it in plain sight. That's part of their evil contract, I guess. Right. It's going to be insane once this cloning stuff comes out and we find out how many like clones have actually been running around and shit. Like, I hope it's not as true as it seems, or but they got like the Hollywood cloning agency. It's like part of their deal. It's like
it's probably pretty deep, man. I don't want it to be because it's creepy and, it means I've been fooled a lot, but it seems like the evidence is out there that a lot of people are just acting as different roles.
And
there's a lot of celebs. A lot of celebs with not Jim, not related to Jim at all, but there's a lot of celebs with twins too.
Convenient. So yeah, that was a Family Guy episode in 2010. Did Rush? He died in 2008 or 2018?
2018, I think. Recently.
Right. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Looks like he died in 2021, according to Wiki, in Palm Beach, Florida. So yeah, he died pretty recently.
That's another thing that we got to talk about with Rush. is he chose to live in Florida for the last portion of his life, retire to Florida. And that's something else. That's something we're going to see with another one of the possible candidates for the fake Jim. This is just the most popular fake Jim candidate so far, the one that kind of has the most meat behind the theory. But we'll get into a couple others. I think that's it with the Rush Limbaugh connections. Anything else?
No, that's what I got on that one. But yeah, I can bring it.
let's just reiterate the fact that why would Jim go into politics? Because his dad was in the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Maybe it weighed heavily on his conscience. Maybe he wanted to right that wrong, or maybe he was repurposed by intelligence operations. Various motivations, but...
And he was still in front of the microphone, or behind the microphone.
Right. Yep. He still got to mess around and get his personality out there. Maybe, and he liked to talk to the crowd a lot. He liked to banter a lot with the crowd. That's partly why he got in trouble, was the crowd would egg him on. And, so he kind of liked to talk to people, not just sing to them. And
he was a man surrounded by machines, too.
Ooh, good point.
He was his own DJ. Yeah.
He became a DJ because Rush would play music. It was like a classic radio show. Damn. Great point. He, self-fulfilling prophecy. For real. He, maybe got bored of the Doors.
It's funny how convincing we've made it that, like, Rush Limbaugh could be But, I mean, who knows? It's like I never even thought of this as a possibility, but...
Well, if you think about, too, the role of a musician to the deep state who wants to utilize music for social control, and then how they could use a radio DJ, it's like a perfect tool.
It's beautiful, yeah.
It's perfect. They can get their ideas out there. They can push whatever, topic they want, such as euthanasia, which, Longo, when you sent me that video last week, it sparked this memory I had growing up in the 90s that euthanasia was like a hot topic. Everybody was talking about it. I had classmates in school who did reports on physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia, and it was like this hot buzz topic all throughout the 90s. And so, if that's something they wanted promulgated into the public, they give Rush the docket for the day, and he goes off reading it and maybe does a whole series on it. So I could see, political commentator as a serious tool for military intelligence, perhaps even better than rock star musician. Perhaps even better. And real quick, I just saw someone in the chat write that Michael Aquino became Jordan Maxwell.
Dude,
I can't
that was
unsee
so funny too. I wanted to say something earlier.
Dude,
that was so funny, dude.
Well, that would be terrible. I mean,
it would be so funny. Like he made he like gels his eyebrows when he's like Michael Aquino. He was like gel.
Oh my God. It looks like people are serious about this. And I can see it. They kind of look alike, you know what I mean? But I think it would suck for me because I've listened to many hours of Jordan Maxwell. I've learned certain things from him. I don't think he's necessarily worth listening to much anymore, but he served a purpose for my development at one time.
Me too. Yeah.
And if I was really spending all those hours listening to a Satanist PDF, that's just not cool. But I think that's the trick they want to play on everybody, right? They want you to be listening to these people and getting their ideas out there like that.
I feel like Michael Aquino is way too much of like a fruitcake to be Jordan Maxwell. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you look at like the voice difference is way too like different for me to like hop on that. But I mean, if he was intentional, and Aquino was like the psyop guy, I guess. So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past him to be able to do it, but
yeah, he like wrote the manual for the Army for psychological operations at one point.
Yeah. The Temple of Set, right? He was like in that or whatever.
Yep. So let's not dive into that because it's too sad. That's right.
Let's listen to, we should have started off with, I think, the Ray Manzarek thing, just to kind of set the stage that it's not ridiculous to think that Jim Morrison faked his death when many of the closest people to him literally suspected or reserved making their mind up 100%. Like they always left a little bit of room in all the interviews they do. The language they're using, the impression they're giving is that they're not convinced he's dead. They always leave a little bit of room for him to still be alive out there somewhere. So let's start off with Ray Manzarek. This is from that spoken word album I was talking about earlier. Forgive me if this section's not in it later on if you're listening. Might get copyrighted, might have to cut it out. Cross our fingers here. I'm going to tweak the speed a little bit. That should help us. I'll speed it up a little bit for your sake. This is from Control Bug on YouTube. But again, this is originally from that spoken word album. So let's listen to what Ray thinks.
On July 3rd, 1971, Jim Morrison died in Paris under what can only be called mysterious circumstances. We don't know what.
This is Ray Manzarek, the keyboardist of The Doors, started The Doors with Jim, just to be clear, speaking.
What happened to Jim in Paris, and I don't think we're ever going to know what happened to Jim in Paris. And the last time I saw Jim was in the recording studio when we were finishing up the album L.A. Woman. And that's actually the last time Jim Morrison was in a recording studio, the last time he ever sang, to my knowledge, on planet Earth. Certainly the last time he ever sang with the Doors. But the last recording session, the last time Jim Morrison ever sang with the Doors was that haunted little whisper voice of Riders on the Storm on the L.A. Woman album. And after he did that, he said, I'm going to Paris. I said, whoa, what a good idea, man. I thought it was an excellent idea. He said, you guys, he said, we're close to being finished here. We've got most of the mixes done. We only got a couple more songs to mix. Everything sounds great. Why don't you guys just go ahead and finish up? And that was kind of unusual, too, because Jim would always be around. He wouldn't leave. I mean.
And this last album, the L.A. Woman songs that he's talking about, L.A. Woman is the song where Jim comes up with his alternate ego or his alias, Mr. Mojo Rising. That's his name anagrammed. Jim Morrison, Mr. Mojo Rising. Now, is this a stretch or what? Rush, rising, rushing, rising. I don't know. If it's a stretch, whatever. Mr. Mojo Rising. What does limbaugh mean? Limbaugh.
Means like rising sun in French.
Does it?
No, it doesn't.
Hang on.
But Longbeard means long beard. It says it was originally from Lombardy, Italy, where it meant Langobardos or long beard in the Middle Ages.
But you can't ignore the Golden Bough either, which is the epic poem from Virgil.
Okay.
Aeneas's journey into the underworld.
But it's worth noting that those last two songs that he recorded, L.A. Woman and Riders on the Storm, Riders on the Storm is kind of about him wandering, even becoming a killer. That he killed someone on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad, right? There's a killer on the road. It's like Jim's the killer. He wanted to make this movie about him being a killer on a road trip. And I think they filmed part of it and turned it into a music video or something. Is he killing himself or unaliving himself? Like in a Fight Club sense? You know, destroying his past self, killing his past self on a trip, on a journey. And when he comes back, when this album's over, the old Jim Morrison's gone? Maybe a stretch, maybe not. But Mr. Mojo Rising is like this new persona for Jim. We've also got to talk about he's the Lizard King. Jim Morrison's nickname was the Lizard King. That's what he called himself. He famously shouted it at a crowd of people, as depicted in the movie, the Doors movie. And then he called himself that on one song. Not to Touch the Earth, I think it's called. Yeah, the trippiest Doors song. He says, I am the Lizard King. What do lizards do? They either shapeshift like a chameleon, or they shed their skin like other lizards. Was Jim Morrison shedding his skin? Is that the Lizard King persona? Being able to shapeshift, morph? Changeling. That's another Doors song. The Changeling. What's a changeling? Isn't that someone who was swapped at birth? No, a supernatural creature.
Yeah,
so
it's like
changeling is
like a shape-shifting creature.
Yeah. Okay, well, hang on here. Changeling, according to Wikipedia, also historically referred to as an oaf or oaf, is a human-like creature found throughout much of European folklore. According to folklore, a changeling was a substitute left by a supernatural being when kidnapping a human being. Sometimes the changeling was a stalk, a piece of wood made magically to resemble the kidnapped human. More often, the changeling was a supernatural being made magically to look like the kidnapped human. Okay, so you get it. Kidnapping demon. One of the Doors' most famous songs is called Changeling. Jim Morrison says over and over again, I'm a changeling. Dun, 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 and just says it over and over. Watch me change. Watch me change.
Demons.
Break on through to the other side, You can read into all these, but there is a kind of a shape-shifting, gonna change my identity thread to a lot of his music. What do you think? Is that a stretch or what? The Lizard King, the Changeling?
That tracks pretty tight.
I get like the Lizard King. Sounds like his demon like guide. I'm getting like a Yellow King from True Detective vibes, like I'm
right.
the Yellow King.
His higher self, his Crowleyan,
as a cult
guardian angel type thing.
He wouldn't be there for all the mixing, but he'd certainly.
Continuing with the words of Ray Manzarek,
come in to listen to the final mixes, the final takes, and the final mix, and to hear the final album. So for Jim to actually leave before he heard the entire finished album was very unusual, and I should have realized something was up at that time. But he said, go ahead and finish it up. You get 2 or 3 songs. Everything sounds great, man. I'm leaving tomorrow for Paris. Pam's already over there. She's got a little apartment and got it all set up. She left a couple of weeks before me, and I'm going to join her over there in Paris. We said, well, that's interesting. Paris, huh? How long are you going to be over there? He said, I don't know. A couple of months, 6 months. I don't know. Maybe
forever.
Who knows, man? I don't know. And I said, that's a good idea, dude, because we had finished our Elektra contract. We had delivered the requisite amount of recordings to Elektra Records. Our contract was concluded, and we were now a free and clear band to re-sign with Elektra if we wanted, to sign with another record company, to do whatever we wanted, or do not.
So listen to what he's saying so far. Jim didn't stay for the mixing phase, which was unusual, and they were also done with their record contract. They were free to do whatever they wanted. It might have felt like they were imprisoned in that contract, for 6 albums, I think he said.
Nothing, to take a long break and just think about man, God, existence, and life. And we had a little bit of money in the bank from the record sales, so we were free to do anything we wanted. So Jim was going to go to Paris. And I said, that's a great idea, actually. Get away from your drinking buddies. Get away from the bad companions and the hangers-on that were always glomming on to Jim and taking him to the bar. And Jim was always paying, and he would wine and dine these sort of ne'er-do-well friends of his, quote-unquote friends. And they were just sucking up his energy and sucking his vital essence and keeping him away from being a poet. He would sit in the bar and talk all his energy away. He wouldn't be home writing. I mean, what he should have been doing was writing instead of talking it out and staggering in way past the midnight hour, far too late. And Pam was always mad at him because he was always running around and getting drunk with his friends. And so Pam and Jim had a stormy relationship. And I think to make things up with her, he was going to go to Paris with her. Why they had picked Paris, I have no idea. They should have gone to London. It would have been a lot better. But they went to Paris for some reason or another. But I thought, that's great. Paris is great because that's the city of light, the city of artists, an American in Paris, Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Henry Miller. And man, that's just get away from all of this LA stuff and this whole rock and roll thing and become a poet again. Become the guy that I knew back in Venice, the guy that I knew in film school at UCLA, the writer, the artist, the good guy, the good human being, the funny human being, the intelligent, sensitive, energized young man that I knew back in Venice. And I thought, this is going to be great. Go to Paris and do it, man. Start to write again. Start to become an artist. Just be an artist again. Don't be a rock star. Be an artist. And
He mentioned the arrest, right? That was weighing on him. Did he mention that yet? Whatever.
I think he skimmed over it, like to get away from all that stuff. Yeah.
Before we forget, folks, my brother reminded me. We have a Jim Morrison picture, mugshot, in the bookstore. We keep it behind the checkout. So you could say we like Jim Morrison a little bit. He's a bit of a Florida legend. I mean, how can you not be proud of him as a Floridian? But okay, moving on.
And off he went. And he said, I'll see you, brother. And I said, okay, man, just stay in touch and we'll talk to you in a while. He went off to Paris and, we didn't hear anything from Jim one way or the other for about a month and a half, 2 months. Record had come out. LA Woman was doing great. People say the Doors are back. The critics of the Doors are back with their intensity and power once again. And critics loved it. And the sales were doing very nicely. And Lover Madly was a hit single. So you had a hit single on an album that had some great long songs, Riders on the Storm and LA Woman and like that. And Jim called John Densmore and asked John how the record's doing. And John said, oh, man, it's doing great. It's racing up the charts and people love it. And Jim said, oh, it's terrific, man. He said, man, as soon as I get back, we got to go on the road. I want to play those songs live. We never got to play those songs live. John said to him, exactly, man. Boy, I'd love to play LA Woman and Riders on the Storm. We could take a bass player with us. And Jim said, yeah, why don't we take that guy that played with us, that Jerry Chef guy, man? We'll take him on the road with us. And John said, yeah, that's a great, we'll take him. Maybe we'll take the guitar player. Maybe not. Maybe we'll get some other guitar player. At least take the bass player along. And Morrison said, boy, I can't wait to play those songs. As soon as I get back, man, let's book a little tour. What do you say? John said, okay, man, when are you coming back? And Jim said, I don't know. I'm having a pretty good time. I'll be here for a while yet. And John said, okay, man. Well, next time I talk to you, stay cool, man. Enjoy yourself. And that was like in the early June. That was early June. And then by July 3rd, that was it, man. I got a phone call telling me that Jim Morrison is dead. A phone call from this guy that was our manager. And he called and said, I just got a phone call from Paris saying that Jim Morrison is dead. And I said, get out of here. I don't believe it, man. Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison said, Paul is dead. There was a lot of, everybody's dead at that time. Paul is dead because he was walking across the street on the Beatles album, Abbey Road, and he was walking out of step and he didn't have shoes on. And in Italy, if you don't have shoes on, that means you're a corpse. You had a suit with no shoes. That's how they bury a corpse. And see, he's out of step with the other three guys. That means he's dead. People were starting to get a little death obsessed. Manson had happened, and the whole thing was getting a little weird. Obviously the Kennedys were dead and Martin Luther King was dead, so people were starting to think, my God, Vietnam, the ghosts. This planet was filled with ghosts of dead young soldiers and Vietnamese women and children and Vietnamese soldiers. They were hovering on the planet, so it was starting to get a little spooky on planet Earth. So I said, I don't believe it, man. It's just death rumors. Because Jim, here's a funny story. Jim, we were at a party, and Jim was supposed to be at the party, didn't come, was a little late coming to the party. Somebody runs in and says, Jim Morrison's just been killed in an automobile accident. Oh my God. 5 minutes later, Jim walks in the door. We said, Jim, man, I thought you were dead. He said, no. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Always quoting somebody, a Mark Twain quote. And I said, and then it was another time he had fallen out of a window and he was supposed to be dead. So when I heard the story that Jim Morrison was dead, I said, it's ridiculous, man. It's just more of that paranoid death stuff. And this guy said, no, this time I think it's serious. And I said, well, I'm certainly not going to Paris to check out some silly rumor, And he said, don't worry, I've got a 12 o'clock flight. This is like 8 o'clock in the morning. So I got the 12 o'clock flight to Paris. I'm going over there. And okay, fine. Well, find out this time, will you, man? And I said to him, just make sure this time, will you? 3-4 days later, I get a phone call. This guy says to me, we just buried Jim Morrison. This is like on a Friday or Saturday. It was Friday, I think. Maybe it was Saturday. I forget, Friday or Saturday. Monday, it was either Monday or Tuesday morning. We just buried Jim Morrison. I said, what? So what are you talking about? I said, yeah. I said, wait a minute. This is like a rumor. This is not a rumor. This is not a silly little paranoid fantasy. You mean he's dead? Yeah, he's dead. We put the coffin in the ground. cemetery is called Père Lachaise Cemetery. It's right in Paris. Beautiful old cemetery. Edith Piaf is there, and Isadora Duncan is there, and Heloise Abelard, and Céline may be buried there for all I know, and Chopin is there, and Molière is there. So there's a lot of artists there. Beautiful old. I said, I don't care who's there, man. Wait a minute, what happened?
He still doesn't believe the story.
Well, yeah. I mean, was he hit by a truck or something? No. His heart stopped. His heart stopped. What are you talking about? I said, how does he look? How does he look? And this guy said, I don't know. I never saw the body. I said, hold it. What do you mean you didn't see the body? It
Red
was
flag.
A sealed coffin. They buried a sealed coffin. I said, you mean you didn't say open? Let me see Jim Morrison. I want to see Jim Morrison dead. You're telling me Jim Morrison is dead. Show me Jim Morrison dead. As a manager of the band, you say, that's our lead singer. That's Jim Morrison. Let me see Jim
Show me
Morrison
the fucking
dead.
body.
Jim Morrison was never seen dead. That coffin was put in the ground.
Can you pause it?
Covered over. And that was it. I said,
that just bears highlighting. Nobody saw the body.
Yep.
So this lends a lot of credence to the idea that he was replaced or that he, became somebody else. Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of mystery wrapped up here.
100%. And this was years later. He in the 90s or something, he made this album.
That's it.
He had a lot of time to think about it, and iron out the questions and mysteries, and still doesn't have the answers.
That's all I know, man. I'm telling you what. Covered over. And that was it. I said, that's it? He said, that's all I know, man. I'm telling you what I know. I was here. He's dead. He's dead. Pam was all broken up. I'm telling you, Pam was just crying and weeping and everything. And, I just couldn't bring myself to open the coffin. And I said, oh, God. And we're waiting for Jim to come back. We're working on some songs. John and Robbie and I are getting together, every Tuesday and Thursday, a couple of hours in the afternoon, putting some little ditties together, working on some tunes, a little of this, a little of that, keeping the chops up, writing some songs. I'd started writing some stuff. John was working on some songs himself, and we're taking this opportunity to do some wood shedding, as they call it, and work on some tunes and waiting for Jim to come back. And all of a sudden, assuming, of course, that Jim's coming back, all of a sudden, Jim Morrison is not only is he not coming back, Jim Morrison is dead. Jim Morrison will never be seen again. Your buddy, your pal, your friend, your brother, your soulmate, the guy, Dionysus. I played Apollo to his Dionysus.
So
Apollo
good.
and Dionysus are never going to hug again. Are never going to make love again on stage. Are never going to make art together.
Sorry.
What
You good,
the
Ray?
hell, Ray?
You chilling, Ray?
So he's never going to touch my ass again musically on stage.
There you have it. Gay manzarek. Keister border. Keister board player of the. Okay, bad joke. We'll edit that one out. Just keep the first.
Yeah. Now leave
Right.
it in, dude. These people need to see everything.
All right, now we got the guitarist of the Doors. 1 second here. Just 1 sec. Oh, sorry, this is John Densmore, not Robbie Krieger. John Densmore.
Content.
Couple ads. Now this is from the HuffPost Live, Huffington Post YouTube channel. So
That's where I get all my news.
Yep. All right, let's get into it.
Let's get crazy.
Died. What was that like? Where were you when you found out that he died? What was that like? Was that an expected thing? Was it a horrible shock?
Well, no, it wasn't expected. I thought, oh my God, he's going to be an Irish drunk and live to 80. Ray and I and Robbie were at our rehearsal room and on a break. And, there'd been some McCartney death rumors a few weeks before.
Oh,
It's like they're on the same script almost. You can't
Honestly.
help but notice, but
And our manager told us, and we kind of, and he just said, I'm going to get on a plane right now and go find out. Well, that was a weekend, and he went, and called and said Jim's dead, and he didn't see him. It was a closed casket, hence the rumors, And Jim was a crazy guy who no one I've ever met would be more capable of faking their death than him. But he also, I don't want to discount, I watched him turn into an alcoholic with a disease. We didn't have substance abuse clinics, so I knew there was an elephant in the room, but I couldn't define it. He's dead. Sorry. I'm sorry.
He said, no one that I know was more capable of faking his own death than Jim.
Yeah. Crazy. And then he also says, I'm sorry. He's dead. Sorry. I'm sorry. It's very much like not Neil Armstrong. Is that Neil Armstrong? I always confuse him with Lance Armstrong.
Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah, Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin.
Neil Armstrong, when they come down and they're all like reluctant to, talk about what happened. And I'm getting similar vibes.
Well, that you pointed out that the story was very similar between what he said and what Ray said. They hit the same exact points.
And honestly, call me a pussy, whatever. They don't seem as beat up as you should be. Like Dave Grohl with Kurt Cobain. I mean, he's a bit of a psychopath too, Dave Grohl. We should tee off on that bitch someday, but I don't
Fighters
like him,
go off of
but,
fight.
You can see how hurt he is by Kurt dying, whether it's suicide, murder, whatever. These guys are just like, yeah, Jim, we got the call, and yeah, that's it. Very matter of fact and short, and
Yeah.
That's
and
it.
then so the Rush Limbaugh theory, I think, might not be true. It might be like a nice distraction, because I'm sure if somebody fakes his death and becomes somebody else, they're going to want a nice cover story that distracts you, right? To kind of draw you away from what's really going on. So there are some other theories out there as well, that it wasn't just Rush Limbaugh. He could have gone into anonymity, where he could have actually taken the role of somebody else that we're not even looking at because we can't see it.
And interestingly, we delayed this show, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, this happened.
After it was stolen, French police announced this week that they have retrieved the bust of the Doors singer, Jim Morrison. According to authorities, they found it amid an unrelated investigation. Some of the many visitors who came to see Morrison's grave welcomed the news and reminisce on the days when people gathered there to dance and play music in the wake of the singer's death in 1971.
It was buzzing. There were people partying, smoking, music, dancing. And then I brought strawberries and kind of gave them out to everyone. Obviously, I was like 20 or, young. And it was just such an amazing experience.
Most insisted the bust should find its way back on top of the gravestone, despite the risk.
I think it would be incredible if they put the bust back onto where it was, and it would attract.
Oh my goodness! Chill with that.
Cemetery wouldn't even be able to hold that many people. I'm saying this as seriously as I can. The amount of people who would rush in here just to see the bust to take.
Who would rush in here?
Oh,
Rush Limbaugh.
Pictures of it.
This guy's in on it.
Nearly 4 decades after it was stolen, French.
Yeah. Also, where did they find it? Like they just glossed over that. Oh, we found it in another investigation. What? We want to hear the story.
Yeah, this is crazy.
I've got one more.
In Paris, it's perfect. International lands, like things can be obscured easier.
This is WESH2 News on YouTube. Old video. This has a little bit to do with it.
Jim Morrison spent many of his early years in Melbourne before becoming one of the enduring superstars of rock and roll in its psychedelic days.
It's almost cultish to the way he's captivated these people over the years. We got
John Tice is the founder of the Brevard Hall of Fame, where Morrison and Kate Upton draw the most attention. Tice shows off Morrison's last will and testament displayed here and says Morrison's remains should return to his birthplace. No one answered the door at the home where Morrison lived after his birth. Tice says representatives of Morrison's estate have inquired of the owner if he would like Morrison's remains. The modest little house where the Morrisons lived is now almost in the midst of downtown Melbourne, with businesses right on the other side. Occasionally, a few Morrison fans and pilgrims do show up here.
Just like Elvis. It's just they don't want to think he's passed away. They want to think he's still alive.
Any coincidence Elvis is one of the most, Donald Trump. People think Elvis is Donald Trump.
What?
People think, oh, you haven't heard that?
No.
Oh, boy.
That's bananas.
Well, I think it's probably Bob Hope, Elvis, but, all right.
And even if he's not, which of course we don't think he is, to them, there is something still living.
So Tice is leading an effort to have Morrison's remains removed from a graveyard in France, where as many as 1,000 people a day come to see the place where he was buried at age 27. Tice is looking for permission from the estate and funds from the public to move the final resting place back to the city where he was born in 1943. In Melbourne, Dan Billow, West 2 News.
At Harbor Freight, all our hand tools.
It's interesting that that's a very brand new development, right? It just came out in the last couple of weeks.
Well, the bust is a recent thing.
Right. I'm sorry.
This is like 9 years old.
Right.
They want to take his
remains.
body.
Yeah.
But there's no body. So they never ended up coming to Florida. You get what I mean? They belong in Florida. And that's what the band was saying. Why'd you bury him in Paris? He was visiting in Paris.
And his last will and testament said, bury me in Melbourne.
I think
President of the Brevard County Hall of Fame wants the
this is WKMG News 6 Click Orlando, 2 years after
remains of rock legend Jim Morrison to be moved.
Yeah, that's right. Move them from his Paris gravesite to Melbourne, the birthplace of the former lead singer of The Doors. News 6's Troy Campbell is live in Brevard County tonight with what those officials are saying. Troy?
Yeah, Jim Morrison, he was born just up the street from where we are now at the former Brevard County Hospital. He's also honored here at the Brevard Hall of Fame behind me. Now, the president of the Hall of Fame, he is spearheading an effort to bring his remains back to Florida from Paris.
Most famous, most infamous, however you want to look at it, that was born in Brevard County.
Born James Douglas Morrison on December 8th, 1943 in Melbourne. Spending the first few months of his life inside this home on Vernon Place, but quickly moving to the other side of the state.
The fact that he was born here, seems like everybody knows that. Everybody knows that Jim Morrison was born in Melbourne, Florida.
Brevard Hall of Fame president.
My kind of guy right here, okay? If it's got to do with Florida, that belongs to us, okay? That's ours now.
John Tice says he received word officials in Paris, where Morrison is buried, were interested in returning his remains to the States, contacting the owner of his childhood home.
The officials that owned the cemetery in Paris offered his remains, according to the owner of the house on Vernon Street, to bring him there. I talked to him real recent because I heard he'd reconsidered. And he said, no, he's not going to do it. And I said, well, get me the contact information, and I'd like to see what I can do.
As lead singer of The Doors, the legendary rock star, no stranger to controversy, leaving the U.S. for Paris after an arrest warrant was issued for him out of Miami. Tice says not everyone in Brevard County would support Morrison's return.
I think it's going to be mixed reviews. I think some people will say, I can't wait. I think other people will say, shame on you.
Tice says it's his understanding that the lease for Morrison's gravesite is almost up, and officials in Paris are concerned about vandalism near his memorial. Tice now hopeful Morrison will once again return home.
If he can't be where he's at, which is where he passed away, then I think he ought to be where he was born, because where else would be better than that?
Tice also says he's still waiting to hear back from officials in Paris and expects any possible return to take some time. Also not decided yet where he would be reburied and if they would then construct a new memorial. Back to you.
All right.
They said the lease was going to be up on the gravesite?
I guess, yeah. Maybe you have a term,
It's not forever. It's like, oh, we got to move your body. Your lease is up.
Well, it's a celebrity gravesite. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, dude, that'd be so funny. They open it up and nothing's in there, or like a stuffed animal is in there.
Well, before we wrap up, let's talk about who the other candidates are.
Right.
Because we talked about Rush, but he's not the only candidate. So, and by the way, we got 868 people watching right now. Thanks everyone for being here. Most of that's on YouTube, I imagine. But thanks if you're watching on X, Rumble, YouTube. Shelly, guys. We're covering the Doors. Doors exposed. Jim's hometown, his birthplace in Florida. Suspicious death. And the Miami connection, right? How it was Miami, the context under which he disappeared and, went to Paris and ended up allegedly dying. He was, not only was this whole thing with his dad, in his past, he was also worried about having to serve 6 months in jail, 6 months in prison, right? And that's a good reason to fake your death. You want to know something? When Austin, you got put on probation a little bit too, right? I was put on probation and like at around the same exact time. And when I was on probation, I literally considered, not saying I planned on or did it, but I literally considered just faking my death on like a paddleboarding accident.
There, bro.
So that I could just like go to Colorado and keep smoking weed.
Dude, I had this crazy thing where when I was incarcerated, you guys remember like the Kingsman or the first one where like the boy gets arrested and like he makes a call and like they just let him out. They just like let him walk out. I was like, I hope somebody just lets me walk out of this bitch. Like you just get in these weird states of mind. So I get it. I don't know if I thought of faking my own death, but I definitely thought of some.
I thought about it. I thought about like disappearing and seeing. It wasn't so much like dying. It was more
like going on the run or something.
It was kind of just like avoiding probation by like pretending to be stranded or like lost somewhere or like some dumb shit like that. Like swept away on my wakeboard or swept away on my paddleboard or something like that.
Rumors of your
fantasy.
Yeah. Rumors of your demise will be greatly exaggerated.
Maybe.
But all right, you want to hear about this alternate theory?
Yeah, let's hear him.
Sweet. So a couple weeks ago, I was hanging out with a friend of mine. She's a good friend here in Homestead. And
save that one for last. Is that okay?
Sure. This is the only other one I know about.
Okay. Then go ahead.
Okay. So my friend tells me, she's like, without me bringing up that we're going to do a Doors episode, she tells me, I think I met Jim Morrison last night. I was like, what?
Excuse me?
Yeah. She's like, yeah, apparently, he faked his death and he's hiding out as this old man named Frank X. And, you can talk to my friend about it. He's friends with him. So anyway, she gives me the phone number of someone who works with a very famous band. Like this is a household name band. Everybody knows. Apparently this guy works on the management team. And I ended up giving him a call and I had a conversation with this guy. I'm like, all right, so what's the deal with Jim Morrison? Is he still alive? And I'm not bringing up anything about Rush Limbaugh. And he goes, you know what, man? He's like, I think Jim Morrison is here with us. I'm like, oh shit. So I'm getting pretty interested. Anyways, he tells me about this documentary that was just made. It's called Before the End, Searching for Jim Morrison. And this came out this year. So again, recent developments here. Now, I did not watch this documentary, but I looked into it a little bit. It's got 4.7 stars on IMDb out of 10. And it's produced by this guy, Jeff Finn, directed by him, who he posits that Jim Morrison is still alive and living in anonymity in Syracuse, New York as a maintenance worker, because apparently he found like Jim's social security number and found that it was still in use. And that was what hinged everything and kind of like launched his investigation.
Oh,
so yeah. So then he goes up to Syracuse and finds this guy named Frank. And it's this old white-haired dude who kind of maybe looks like an old Jim Morrison. But honestly, I don't think it's that compelling. The reviews aren't that great. I looked into Jeff Finn, some of his other projects.
4.7, bro.
4.7, yeah, it's pretty fire. One of Jeff Finn's other projects was he played a role as breastfeeding husband.
You telling me Rotten Tomatoes is in on the fucking
Oh yeah, dude.
conspiracy?
They don't want you watching what's true, bro. They get.
So I just have to bring up the idea that, okay, people think that Jim Morrison became this guy Frank, who's like a maintenance worker somewhere in nowhere, upstate New York. I don't think this is true. I don't think it's as compelling as the Rush story. But if for anyone who really wants to give an earnest investigation, you probably should watch this documentary before the end. The trailer is just a bunch of flashy images. Like, we can watch it. I don't know if there's much to it. But that's one of the stories. That's one of the theories out there.
Morrison, the lead singer for the.
All right, let's watch the trailer for this. Official trailer from Z Machine. I guess they're affiliated with the movie. Searching for Jim Morrison before the end.
Doors, a rock music group is dead. He was 27.
But the death was kept secret to avoid a sensation.
They say natural causes.
Which natural causes, in specific, he wasn't sure.
He was buried in Paris in the same cemetery where Balzac and other French immortals.
Balzac? Hang on, what? Hang on, what?
You haven't heard of Balzac, bro?
Sensation.
They say natural causes.
Which natural causes, in specific, he wasn't sure.
He was buried in Paris in the same cemetery where Balzac and other French immortals lie.
My name is Jeff Finn, and I'm a lifetime fan.
Oh my God, yeah.
He's like a fanatic. He's like a Doors
I've made it
super
my
fan.
life's work to extract the real truth from a 50-year-old tale that's been riddled with rumor, lies, and myth.
Jim Morrison's social security number is still active in Rochester, New York, and I think that's like an hour away from where you are now.
Along the way, I get introduced to a very suspicious character.
How does he know all Jim's friends?
It's Balzac.
We're seeing that there is what appears to be a major donor on the book here.
I've only shown about 3 people this in the last 50 years.
They all got into Mad Magazine.
Where do you get a car? How do you get a body in it that quickly?
Is the abuse real? Is the death real? Is anything real about Jim Morrison?
So, I invite you to join me in my search for the real truth. To ask yourself, what if everything we think we know about Jim Morrison is wrong?
Yeah, we should have him on.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Sounds like we could get him on.
Yeah, his interviews didn't really say anything. Like, I listened to one of his interviews, and it was just, there was no gravy. There was no
He just
gravy
wants-
at all.
well, he wants
I
you
got
to
no
buy
gravy
and
from
watch. He wants you to watch the movie.
Right.
Oh, true. He held the gravy, so you'd watch the doc.
And again, one of Jeff Finn's other roles on IMDb, it was a role of breastfeeding husband from a short film in 2011.
It's a vital role.
Right.
That's what he's
In the
involved
family.
in.
All right, there's a couple other candidates.
So, and I guess this is on like Apple Plus, or if anyone's seen it, let me know what you think.
They don't recycle social security numbers, right? Like, once people die, do they give them to like living people?
I don't think they're recycling, but also, how do you know that it was Jim's social security number?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was just a good story, as well.
Yeah, and I didn't watch the documentary. I shouldn't judge it.
I think that's all I got.
Yeah, I don't know of any other mainstream theories, or not even mainstream, but public theories.
Okay, here's a good one. So apparently there's the guy who claims to be Jim Morrison's son.
Jim Morrison? Son?
Yeah. This guy named Cliff Morrison. This guy claims to be his son and performs with the son of Robbie Krieger.
I mean, he looks a lot like him, you know.
He performs with Robbie Krieger as the Lizard King. He's got red hair, and apparently, apparently Jim liked redheaded women. Okay, that's all we'll say. You know, Pam was redheaded, his longtime girlfriend. But you can kind of see it.
Yeah.
You can kind of see it. Yeah, this guy fully claims to be Jim Morrison's son, from what I've seen. That looks a ton like Jim Morrison. And he sounds like him, just a little bit more high-pitched voice.
The forehead just kind of throws you off because he's got such a big forehead.
This is from YouTube channel. Oh, this is Cliff Morrison.
Yeah, this is a guy who needs to be short-haired.
Keep your eyes on the road and your hands upon the wheel.
Just awful. Oh my god, he sucks. He's going for like a Primus sound here. Good time. I say we're gonna have ourselves a good time. Looks like the Cage the Elephant singer.
But okay. Now here's a little documentary, like an old documentary, giving this a little bit more. This is from Floyd Bocox, Channel 10 News, San Diego.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Thanks for the great forecast tonight. Mystery tonight. Is he or isn't he? A young man in Colorado, he the son of rock legend Jim Morrison.
Yeah,
Mark
was she
Matthews
cross-eyed?
met up with him today and
I
got
hope
his-
so. Yeah, she's got a lazy eye there.
Cliff Morrison washes cars for a living and waits. Waits for the day when he is recognized as the son of Jim Morrison, the rock icon who powered the Doors to worldwide fame in the 60s and is still golden more than 20 years after his death.
I'm just starting to learn about my father now, in this past year.
Cliff Morrison says he found out only recently about his famous father. His mother never told him about her brief affair with the rock star.
They got together probably for about a month,
He does look like him
then it was gone.
because he doesn't have dark hair. He doesn't have some of the overt features, but everything else
is there.
The way he squints, Jim
Yeah.
squints like
The
that.
eyes.
Yeah, Jim squints just like that.
The mouth is
gone
like
and
the
she was
same.
pregnant
Like
with
the
me.
teeth obviously are like fucked up, but like his mouth, his gait is kind of the same.
That's what you get when Jim Morrison knocks up some trailer trash. I mean, this is exactly what you'd get, people,
But there is no documentation yet that can prove that. Cliff Morrison's driver's license says he is Clifford Marston from Utah. And Jim Morrison's family considers Marston a stranger. But listen to this.
This one's a lot
Cliff
better.
Marston's rendition
That
of
one's a lot
Morrison's
closer.
I think he's a smaller guy. I think he has like a thinner voice than Jim, but kind of the timbre is the same.
Yes, the
Let's say.
timbre.
Yeah.
If you will.
song was enough to convince Jim Morrison's brother-in-law.
He has mannerisms that no entertainer could imitate. He has visual.
Let's hear that.
As
Edition of
Hear that one more
Morrison's
time.
song was
Is
enough
that Paul
to convince
McCartney?
Jim Morrison's brother-in-law.
He has mannerisms that no entertainer could imitate.
Look
He
at this
has
guy.
Visual,
Is that Paul McCartney?
Physical, runs like Jim, walks like Jim, acts like his grandfather. In every way, it's a genetic, and I'm happy with it.
Al Graham has teamed up with Cliff to put together a band to sing in Jim Morrison's style, and their first concert is set for the Spreckles Auditorium in late June. But until they light the world on fire, rock and roll is taking a back seat to their mobile car wash.
You know, being a rock star is hard work too.
It's ahead of his time. Mobile car wash.
Mark Matthews, 10 News, Coronado.
Up next, a very important live report for women that could mean the difference between life and
Interesting.
And then there's a couple other, candidates for people who say, oh, this is Jim Morrison. This is Jim Morrison. One of them is a homeless guy in Pennsylvania who sings very closely to Jim Morrison. And all he does is drink all day. And some people think that's Jim Morrison. There's also a guy who went on this. What's this YouTube channel called? Soft Underbelly? Soft White Underbelly? Is that right?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
It's something like that. Underbelly YouTube channel where he interviews like drug addicts. There's this guy who also claims to be Jim Morrison's son on that interview series. So that's what it's titled as.
Guys, I think I'm Jim Morrison's son.
Good,
I mean, yeah, I'd say so.
He's kind of like Genghis Khan. I mean, how much he toured.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah,
we all got a splash.
He was dropping bucket loads off at each state, probably
each stop.
I saw a comment, and I think I agree with this. This new documentary alleging that Jim became Frank X, some guy in New York. I think that is to take heat off Rush and the other theory. There always has to be a controlled opposition, a controlled alternative theory.
Well, you just said that about Rush.
Yeah, but I mean,
I know, I'm just teasing, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I brought that up as a total possibility. But it does seem like, especially with the news coming out about the bust, with the news coming about his grave, how they want it to be moved back to Florida, how the lease is going to be up soon. It's like they might be scrambling. It's like, okay, quick, introduce another theory just to confuse people, to lead them, down these rabbit trails. So that's what we're good at here, walking down the rabbit trails, isn't it, guys?
Oh yeah, we hop down those bitches like 80 miles an hour, like a jackrabbit.
Gopher holes
on speed.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, and the Doors logo, like the way they stylized the name, the Doors, the O's look like pills that you can break in half.
Mm.
Yeah, they do. I get what you're saying, like the slim, like vertical.
Oh,
just the circular pills that you can. They have like a line in the middle.
Speaking of drugs, Ray Manzarek tells another story on that spoken word album. There's a ton of good stories where they were recording one of their albums and they had a mound of marijuana on the table that they were rolling up in the studio, like a mountain of marijuana. And Jim Morrison was out on a walk and bumped into the captain of police, or like the head police captain, sheriff of LA or something, and brought him into the studio. Like, hey, I'm Jim Morrison. Nice to meet you. Brings him in like he knew the record label guy already. And was like, oh, you're recording over here. Let me go in and say hi. And the chief of police comes in while they're recording with all this weed. Doesn't say anything. Just lets them go.
That piggy's way out of his league there.
Yeah. But all right, guys, in the comments, I'm sure there's some stuff we missed. Sure, there's some rabbit holes we couldn't get to. This was more of a Jim Morrison thing than a Doors thing, but Gulf of Tonkin, Aleister Crowley connections, Jack Parsons, his proximity to the NASA and the space missions and all this stuff. Him bouncing across Florida, being in the promotional video, his arrest and kind of downfall in Miami. Interesting, it happened in Florida. Suspicious death, right? Potentially to avoid prosecution or to avoid, paying that money and serving a prison sentence. Him potentially being Rush Limbaugh. Him becoming radicalized, or turning political. So we went through a ton of stuff. And Seth, that rumor that you heard, did it just lead back to New York, or was there someone in Florida?
No, so the guy, Frank, the New York guy, was brought down to Florida to do, I forget what. But it just seemed like a whole bunch of nothing. Like when the manager told me, he's like, yeah, we brought him to Florida. I was going to pay to have this documentary made about him, but I ran out of money and had to send him back. And like nothing's precipitated from that. So he really just said, watch the documentary on Apple Plus. I'm like, and that's kind of when I got the sense of like, oh, you don't really know this guy. You don't really know anything about this theory.
Yeah.
So
true. Well, all right, guys, I think that's all we can fit in. Went an hour over, extra hour on this one. But
when boys get together, we can't stop. That's the thing. It's like a fat girl and Dairy Queen or something.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody go follow up with like, what's his name? Dave McGowan. He's got the books on Laurel Canyon. If you want to know more about the Doors and the 1960s scene and how the CIA was directly infiltrating that whole scene and
Very
producing
good
some
book.
of these bands, check him out. He died on November 22nd as well.
Oh, did he? And he was
2015.
he was cancered. He was like suicided apparently, or like killed. Like that's a theory.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
So same day as Aldous Huxley, John F. Kennedy, and also Huxley's brother's birthday was also 11/22. So, anyways, yeah, check out the Dave McGowan book, and also there's a book called Chaos by Tom O'Neill that goes into the Charles Manson CIA connection in the Laurel Canyon scene, and Charles Manson's another huge one. How they Manchurian candidate people. People don't know about that. That's a huge rabbit hole in itself. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks for having us on tonight, Longo. Thanks everybody for listening. It was definitely an interesting topic there.
Oh, yeah. Firing on all cylinders on this one tonight. Austin, you want to leave people with anything?
Yeah, just to take a deeper look at all these idols we look up to and all this music we're pumping in, and you wouldn't think that there's like elaborate schemes to like mass hypnotize people and whatnot, but I think there are, and we've found enough evidence, throughout all of our researches, it's like, but yeah, thank you for having me as well. Sonnen Mensch is my YouTube channel.
Sure. Yeah. You guys go check out. Hang on. Ooh. Not yet. Ooh. Sorry, I can't hold it in.
Free Shem 2025 in the comments here.
Jump the gun on that one a little. But guys, go check out Seth, author of The Fruit Companion. Okay. The Art of Unlearning.
The School of Unlearning on YouTube.
School of Unlearning. Sorry. You keep changing names. You keep rebranding on us, No, just kidding. The School of Unlearning, guys. Go follow Seth. Sonnen Mensch on YouTube. If you want to follow Austin, give them both a subscribe, people. Come on.
Just give me a kiss, if anything.
And we'll see you this coming Monday with a new band, new Florida band, music, conspiracy theory. And thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Love you guys.
Yo.
Peace.
Yup. Wild Indian, yeah.
Hey, V, line them up.
I'm a wild Indian, you know I go crazy. Ain't really Indian, that boy fugazi. I just keep it player, you can never play me. You got an ass so fat, girl, let's make a baby. And another one. Then I'm back to the trap, I'm trying to double some. She a bad woke chick and I love her tongue. We some jurisdiction boys, we some one-on-ones. Look, don't compare me to no Martin dog, I'm like Malcolm X. Die by our freedom, we'll leave a crack and stretch. Round of applause, boy, you know we clapping text. Chucky dog, child's play, yeah, nigga, that's what's next. Open up the cans just like Arizona. Pull up masked up like we got the Rona. We set up jurisdictions when we buy the corner. How you claiming that's your hood and you not the owner? Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. Whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the shit.
Like my niggas said, bitch, we the shit. I can't keep the peace. If it pop off, then I want a piece. I'm just on release. I'm in go mode, motherfuck the thief. In these streets like EBT, when we at war, make peace with me. I don't give a damn, understand. Fuck who stole this land, white or black or tan. Understand, it's fuck who stole this land. Might have seen me get little buddy these hands. He wasn't no abo man. A lot of these dudes is Sambo man. They full of shit like my ammo can. What they call an N-word out the wrong mouth as an ambulance. Wild Indian, get it in advance, or you can post date it. Ask around, I'm the most hated. Straight sacred, they stole acreage. Go ape shit, show ain't shit. It won't be televised, I don't tape shit.
Be the B, I just pulled up in the need for speed. Free the land, tell the colonizers that they need to leave. Wild Indian up in my veins, you know how we bleed. You ain't gotta lie about who we is, dog, just keep it G. We at war, we can't keep the peace. Since we at war, gotta keep the peace. Whack a cone, then I meditate. Should I need to breathe? Keep a Olmec head when we slide, dog, cause we the sheep.